Hey, good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. First post, Lewis. Good job. Uh, I didn't even post. He even beat me to it. Oh, is my audio? Oh, good. My audio is working. Notice my audio is working, and there's no like wire hanging out. I'm trying to be responsible this week and tuck my wire into my shirt. And also, Lewis, I know you asked, and my old microphone is fixable. It's just going to require some really fine soldering, and I'm just not quite there. So anyway, my backup, it'll be my backup microphone. One of these days, I'll get brave enough with a soldering gun and fix it. So anyway, Kyle, good morning. Hope everybody's doing well today. It's going to be a different day for me. I have a bunch of training to do for CBT Nuggets. We have um, every so often we have a group of videos that we have to train for ourselves. This one is on it's compliance training, so I get to watch a lot of Simona's videos, which is awesome. Uh, and so that's what I'm mainly going to do today. I'm going to watch videos, take the quizzes, pass the things that I have to do, and depending on how quick I get done, maybe I'll make a couple videos. But we'll see. Anyway, that's what today's going to be. So anything interesting happening in everybody's world of being in their own homes? I think that's pretty much worldwide now. Everybody's in their own homes. So how are things going? Everybody healthy? So, Lewis, I have not watched it in English yet, believe it or not. I I watched the entire thing in Portuguese, but I haven't gone back and watched it in English. So I will try to do that. But I really did watch the whole thing in Portuguese. Jason, good morning. I hope everything's going well for you down there in Traverse City. I don't know what your hospital situation is like down there, but um, it's a scary time to live in, that's for sure. And yeah, keeping the kids entertained. Kyle, so here's I we're empty nesters now, my wife and I. But I have to admit, I miss our kids fiercely. It's just Donna and I at home, and that's wonderful. And she's my best friend, and we're not having like issues with being together. But I miss my kids. Oh my goodness, do I miss my kids? And FaceTime is great. Dropping things off and waving through the window is great. It's just not the same. So, what the heck happened to my hair? I actually did my hair this morning. I don't know what. Huh. Well, before I record videos, I'm gonna have to do something about my hair. Oh, it's because I get it. I'm not able to go to the hair guy to do my hair. So anyway, uh, all good with you. My lungs are still treating me well. So yes, I got a weird, horrible. It is. I'm not gonna lie. It hurts a lot. Chest pain, but it's just like a rib out of place in my breastbone. So I tell Donna it only hurts when I breathe, but it's not a like the lungs issue. It's just like a rib cage issue. So it's still even that though. It's a little bit freaky to like have pain when you breathe because you're like oh my goodness it's the Rona, and yeah. So no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I just pulled something weird. Getting old. Oh, Lewis, thank you. Yeah, I did the. She designed it. I'm not much of a designer, but I was able to put some stuff up for her, so it looks pretty good. I think it turned out pretty good. Excuse me. Oh, pardon me. I was trying to remember where my microphone was. I didn't want to sneeze on my microphone. Easter will be weird this year. That is for sure. It's funny. The New Zealand. I don't know what she is. President, prime minister. I don't know what she's called. But in New Zealand, people were asking for her to lighten the restrictions for the Easter holiday, and she said the only person who doesn't have to maintain the restrictions is the Easter Bunny. The Easter Bunny's allowed to go out and about, which I thought was pretty adorable. So, uh, so I have a sister who works at the local hospital. I probably mentioned it last week. She's always on my mind. She's a new nurse, just graduated, got her first nursing job, and it's at the hospital. And we have a big hospital here in the town I live in Petoskey. It's like probably one of the biggest hospitals in the area. And maybe Traverse City's bigger. I don't know, but we have a really big hospital here in Petoskey, and she works the floor below the COVID level, which is just, oh man, I worry about her all the time. And my mom works at a hospice center with a bunch of people who are very vulnerable. Anyway, I didn't. So I didn't see the green screen. I saw one photoshopped thing that had the Queen wearing a Starfleet uniform, which I thought was funny. Told her if I would told her bunnies can't get the corona. That's yeah, um, yeah. Hopefully bunnies can't get the corona. Although I guess tigers can now, right? TC's Munson is the biggest in northern Michigan. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think Petoskey has some specifics that they really do well, but in our area of northern Michigan here, it's definitely the biggest because we serve. I mean, people in I think Sheboygan, all the way over in Presque Isle County, generally come here. But yeah, I was pretty sure TC was bigger as well, which makes sense. TC is a much bigger town than Petoskey. So anyway, in fact, it's a little surprising how big our hospital is for how tiny our town is. It's not a real big town, Petoskey, but we do have a shockingly large hospital for the size of our town. So anyway. I told myself I'm gonna finish this cup of coffee before I start training. So if you're wondering why I'm still here and I'm not listening to my training stuff, it's because I wanted to chat and also I wanted to drink a full cup of coffee to fully engage my brain. And you're probably thinking, Sean, why don't you fully engage your brain before you make and create training? And I don't have an answer to that. Yeah, I think we do. I think there might be a hospital in St. Ignace, but there's a hospital in St. Ignace. There's a hospital in Sheboygan, but they're very small. I think they just have emergency rooms, but nothing, no ICU departments, nothing like that. So I think there are a couple tiny towns, but hospitals in towns, but nothing significant. And Gaylord also has a. Gaylord's hospital is not too shabby. Um, Charlevoix has a decent hospital, but that's actually coming down closer to you. So I'm not sure what their ICU situation is. Anyway. Yeah, I may be a pro cris- at crastinating. I'm a pro at crastinating. Yeah, that seems about right. Little hospital in Kalkaska and Grayling. Yeah, so I wonder about those little hospitals. Are they freaking out? I mean, every hospital has to have a plan, right? I mean, they have to have a plan for what about when people come in or they call in or But if they don't have the facilities to, keep them, especially if they get bad, I don't know do they say. No, you need to drive to Traverse City or drive to Petoskey. I'm not sure what the protocol there is. So I did hear. So my mom. I'm sorry for everybody who's here and doesn't know Michigan geographics, but um, we're all pretty close. The towns are pretty close, but so my sister works here in Petoskey at the hospital. My mom works in Sheboygan, and talking with them, I guess the Sheboygan hospital is preparing to take in COVID patients if necessary. I don't think they have any right now, but like they had a big hospital, but it's been shuttered for years. I mean, there are entire wings that have just covered in dust because they haven't been used. So anyway, I'm not really sure. No, I'm not pro castration. If that's no, nope. Not pro meaning in favor. Not pro as in a professional. In fact, if anything, I'm anti, except for our cats. Sorry, cats. So yeah, if you don't follow me on Twitter, we set up my I guess Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I guess it's the same everywhere. But my wife is a teacher. In fact, my wife is a drama teacher, and this is interesting. So she also is teaching now a Bible class because the Bible teacher didn't want to do online teaching, so she's taken on another class, which is specifically why we set up the background. So she has like a backdrop for video teaching, but um, her her biggest class in the school year is drama class, and she does a spring musical. Well, the spring musical's been canceled. Obviously, we're not going to do a spring musical because we can't get together. to practice, much less perform. But anyway, she still has these students in class, and we're doing online training. So she's trying to figure out what exactly to do for them. And I told her that if she got all the kids to take their phone and in landscape mode, not portrait mode, landscape mode, and recorded themselves saying their lines, if she got me all of those videos and she put them in order, I would just do hard cuts so that we could do the whole play with kids on their phones saying their parts. So like a conversation would be a hard cut between like Jimmy and Janie going back and forth, just hard cut, hard cut, hard cut. And it would not be great, obviously, but it might be an interesting thing for the kids to at least participate in. And it's a musical. They're doing Willy Wonka, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I thought, well, if the kids in a particular song could get together and do like a Zoom or whatever I think they're using Zoom as their technology, or a Hangout or something, and record themselves all together, the sync might be awkward, but that might even make it a little more funny to put them in those particular spots. So I hope she follows through and does that because I think it would be the hard cuts would be easy for me, right? I mean, if they're in order, I just plop them on there and I cut out the silent parts, and it just goes boom, 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 back and forth. So anyway, I think it would be, I think it'd be good. I'm not. I mean, you've seen my videos. I'm not all about fancy editing. I just do pretty much just hard cuts, and I think it would be good. And I told her as long as she put them in order, like the lines of the play, so like numbered all the video files in order. I would edit it out to have it as conversational as possible because I could just clip, 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 clip. Anyway, I hope it works out. And I hope that if it works out, we're able to publish it because I think it would be really great for other schools, teachers, everybody to see, like, hey, look what we were able to do in quarantine, right? With distance learning, because it's official here in Michigan, schools not going back into session unless something drastically changes, but I don't think anything's going to change there. I think it would be silly, even if the COVID infection numbers dropped off. I think putting all the kids together in a school would be tempting fate a little bit too much, especially since we're now prepared for it or preparing for it. Anyway, I think it'll be fun. So I think teachers. I mean, of course, teachers are stepping up, right? Teachers are stinking awesome. There are my youngest daughter is currently in college, and she said that that spring break is over. So this week her classes went back into session, and she said some of the professors are stepping up with amazing video and interactive stuff, and like all sorts of explanations and the stuff that and websites they can do, and all of the stuff. She said some of them not so much, which I guess is to be expected, use a metronome to keep tempo and sync. So that's the thing. What I don't know about the keeping them in sync, if they could hear each other in real time, but there's always like if there's like a 20 millisecond delay, so like you're hearing the tick when somebody else is hearing the talk, and then everybody's trying to sing. I don't know. What I thought, and I've thought quite a bit about this, is I would say, okay, I would have like, if there's a main singer, like usually every song has like a main soloist or whatever, and have that person be the person who dictates, they play the music and that music is playing, and then they start singing when other people have a part to sing. They sing along, but the main track is like the main singer who's playing the music on their track. I think that would be the best. And then if somebody is a little off or they're delayed or something, then the main music should still be going. So we'll see. I am espresso machineless, and Kyle, I don't think that I'm gonna get it back. My girls are just loving having the espresso machine out at the farmhouse. It's been there since my daughter's wedding, and at this point, I've just been drinking coffee, and the calories for the lattes I don't need anyway. So they're really happy. I'm probably just gonna leave it there. Which, wow, Grant, I can't believe I'm saying that, but it is what it is. This quarantine has taught me that simplicity is a good thing, I guess. It's also taught me that toilet paper is far more valuable than I ever realized. And that's from a guy with a bidet. So, Jason, I'm sorry to keep picking on you, but I mean you're close by. Are you a Costco guy? Have you been to Costco down there in Traverse City? For anybody else wondering, that's the closest Costco to me or anywhere in northern Michigan. There's one in Traverse City. Um, is it still insane? I mean, I haven't. We have not been able to. So my wife and I are in the house, right? We don't go even to the grocery store. We do like Instacart or Shipt to have stuff delivered. But toilet paper has literally never been in stock. Never one time has it been available. So I'm curious, is it still crazy? Oh, you haven't been down there. You haven't been to Costco. I should like send you my Costco card so you could go and check it out. Anyway, yeah, I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of people who have very stocked pantries from now on. In fact, it is going to be like the um, like our grandparents or great grandparents after the Great Depression, where they would do things like, reuse their tinfoil, wash out their Ziploc bags. That's like going to be our generation now. And like our grandkids and great grandkids are going to be like, why does grandpa have 1,000 rolls of toilet paper in his pantry? Anyway, a bidet. Jason, I have to admit, we got our bidet. I actually thought my wife asked me to get one, and she said she never asked me to get one. So apparently, I have dreams where my wife asks me to buy a bidet. I have no idea. But I bought it, and because I was buying it for my wife, I thought I got a really nice one. It like has the inline water heater, so it like sprays nice warm water in your hoo ha. But anyway, it has like a dryer built in and all this stuff is really nice, heated seat, etc. Um, but we got it and I installed it because I paid a ton of money for it, and I have to admit, I can't believe everybody doesn't have one. If you get a chance, of course they're sold out now, but eventually they'll come back into stock. I cannot recommend a bidet enough. It's just so stinking awesome. So anyway, that's my enough poop talk for today. But they're just amazing. Oh, I missed them. Let's see. Return shopping. Most stocks are returned no longer. Oh, that's awesome, Lewis. It is still very, very, very empty here. Because again, we're doing the Instacart shopping where you like communicate with your shopper while they're in the stores, and everything that I tried to buy, she'll be like, it's out of stock, it's out of stock, it's out of stock, and she says, would you like a replacement? I'm like, what is there? And she'll like take a picture of the shelf, and there'll be like empty shelves and like a 1 pound bag of organic bleached flour. I'm like, well, I don't want to pay $12 for a pound of flour. Uh, and it's like that everywhere. I like had toilet paper. Every time I put toilet paper on there just in case, and every time like they'll reply, ha ha ha, yeah, there's no toilet paper of any brand. It's crazy. Cody, good morning. Hello. Uh, Walmart a couple times, local grocery store twice. Really, okay, not a lot of options. That's so weird, Jason, because every time that I have done it, and maybe it's just where we are, I don't know, but it is so crazy that everything is still out of stock. And I wonder, so I haven't asked friends to go, but I've kind of been curious, like if somebody who I know and I was like just on the phone with were there, if they'd say, well, yeah, I mean, like there's not this toilet paper, but there's this. But the people that I communicate with, like the shoppers themselves over the app, they say there's just nothing there. So I don't know. Yeah, yeast. So I managed to order. So this SAF. I don't know if it's SAF or SAF. I don't know how I say it, but it's like yeast that a lot of bakers use. It's instant yeast. It's supposedly really really good yeast, and it comes in vacuum packed 1 pound bags, which is quite a bit of like a pound of yeast is quite a bit of yeast. So anyway, I managed to order it, and I have no idea how it was still in stock. But I got it from Amazon and from one of their resellers, and it arrives today. So I'm gonna have yeast for days. Even though I'm mainly a sourdough guy, I'm gonna have lots of yeast. Looking forward to that. Post. I saw that Lewis, a 10 pound bag, and you're selling it for $28 a pound. Yeah, you're a price gouger, man. That's illegal here. They're gonna come for you. There is a store locally who is they bought a ton of all-purpose flour in bulk, and they had repackaged it in like 5 pound bags, which I thought was really cool. But that store doesn't have shoppers, right? Like they don't do delivery, so yeah, there's no way for me to get it. Oh, the dogs came in. Hi, dogs. Oh, I don't know. I don't think I told you. Um, I had an entire loaf of sourdough bread get moldy before I even sliced it. It broke my heart. I chopped it up into pieces to throw it out for the birds, but oh man, it just broke my heart. I think you're right on the store shopping. We tried that and mixed results. A small grocery store here and find it better for me to mask. Yeah, I I get it, and if I wasn't so paranoid about you know catching the disease, myself or my wife would probably just go to the store to do it because as nice as the idea of delivery shopping is, it's not perfect, right? I mean, it's always I don't know, it's a little funky because you're not, I mean, if I were there, I'm like, well, oh, there's not, oh, there's no iodized salt in a 2 pound box, but I mean, here's salt. I mean, it's salt, right? Whereas they usually are supposed to like trade products or like ask for replacements. I don't think it goes as smoothly as you'd think. So, anyway. Oh, they get deliveries on Tuesday. And I'll see that's interesting too. Um, Sometimes I'll place an order and I will get a delivery person like 2 hours later. Uh, Sometimes I place an order, like I placed an order on Sunday and it isn't even being shopped until this evening. So, I mean, there's anything that I put in there is probably either out of stock or out of stock and already restocked. I don't know. But you can imagine that they have their choice of who they want to shop for because there's so many people doing like what we're doing. Uh, I understand it's not paranoid if there really are issues. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know. I know. I mean, I'm not ashamed that I'm being inside except for walking, with just my wife. We go on walks and stuff. Um I'm just tired of it. I just want it to be done. And yeah. So, anyway, somebody really close to me, I won't say who, to protect her privacy, but was exposed and so now is in isolation. She's not showing symptoms, but it's still that's rough too. Anyway, on that note, I'm almost done with my coffee. Actually, I just realized it's Wednesday. I have to take out the garbage so that the garbage truck doesn't go by. So I'm going to play the fancy music while I go take out the garbage, and then I'll be back and I'm going to start training. So I'll be right back, y'all. forgot about the kitty litter, so I had a bunch of stuff to do. Oh, let's see. Oh, I'm gonna catch up here. I have to scroll. That's a good thing. Something about this last weekend not being a good weekend to shop. Oh, I didn't realize. Yeah, I never thought about that, Jason. That's actually probably a good point. If they come out, people, and especially people on Wick, it's so specific what they can get that maybe it's a good thing that they were able to do that. So, Cody, Amazon. Maybe I should catch up because maybe we talked about it more. Shut the package. Yeah, so Amazon too. I've had mixed results with Amazon. Some things like they'll say it's gonna arrive like the end of April or something, and then it will arrive, longer than normal, but within like 4 days or so. But then there's a few things that we ordered like the end of March, and it said like will arrive on April 22nd, and yeah, there's still no shipping information. It still says like in process or whatever. So anyway, we ordered my daughter a coffee pot for her birthday. Her birthday was on the 3rd, so we ordered it early, like the end of March, and yeah, it hasn't even remotely come close to shipping yet. So we'll see. But yeah, for the most part, Amazon's been good if it's in stock. I mean, you still can't get other things. Some things are just still not in stock, and even on Amazon, or sometimes it'll show it's in stock. I think they've been trying to crack down on people who are price gouging, like get a 5-pound bag of flour on Amazon for $186 or something. I think they're trying to shut those things down pretty quickly. But anyway, yeah. So I actually I'm gonna start training. It's a little after 9:30, so feel free to. Let me see if I can move this so you can actually see what I'm doing. All right. So I'm just gonna do some training. You should be able to hear it, but feel free to either flash the light or say something. I'll try to catch up when I can. I have to find a link though. That's not it. A playlist has been. There we go. Okay. Well, now you know my password is ... Okay, that did not take me to the right spot. Try this. There we go. All right, so yeah, I will be listening to training, and I think most of these are by Simona. So anyway, after every video, I'll just look over and say hi real quick.
But anyway, you can look up the detail for yourself if required. Well, in this video, I'd like us to take just a few minutes tackling the basics. So we will look generally at what it is, and of course what it stands for, which is General Data Protection Regulation. So sure, I understand English, so I can deduce that GDPR is regulation around data protection, but more specifically, GDPR protects the personal...
That doesn't seem right.
...data of EU...
Why is it so quiet? Oh. Alright.
...residents. Now this is a good definition to remember, but we do need to make sure that we're clear on what we mean by personal data and EU resident. So let's start with the EU bit, and you may well know that the European Union is currently made up of 28 different countries over here in Europe. And I know that 28 countries sounds like a lot, but actually not every European country is in the EU. So for example, Switzerland is in Europe, of course, right bang in the middle here, but it's not a member state of the EU. But anyway, you can look up the detail for yourself if required. So our point is, GDPR protects the personal data of these good folks living here in the EU. But now let's drill down into what we mean by personal data. And as a definition, we can say that personal data is any information that could be used to identify someone, a particular living individual, that is. And that might be a single piece of data, such as some sort of personal identification number, like the equivalent of a social security number or a national insurance number or something, or it might be a combination of multiple pieces of information, such as name and address, which together will identify a specific person. Now you can see some examples of what might constitute personal data here. We've got some obvious ones such as name and address and date of birth and email address and ID number, but also online identifiers such as IP addresses or cookie identifiers or even RFID tags, and also some other personal information which, as you can see, is going to be rather more sensitive in nature. But note that this is not an exhaustive list, these are just examples, and remember that these bits of information could be used alone or in combination to identify someone. So we now broadly understand that GDPR protects the personal data of EU residents, but I know you've still got questions. Why do we need GDPR? And what are those regulations? And how does it affect the business that I work for? Well, in a nutshell, depending on what study you read, apparently less than 20% of us feel that we have control over the data that we have provided online, and that's not a nice feeling. So GDPR is about building up trust and transparency by providing the set of rules for how companies and other entities can process the personal data of EU residents. So we did already have some rules in the past, but GDPR refreshed this with new regulations which were approved back in 2016 but came into force in May 2018. Now, we will look in more detail about what those regulations actually require you to do in other videos, but suffice it to say, if you break the rules, there are penalties. So I can deduce that GDPR is regulation around data protection. Those regulations actually require you to do in other videos, but suffice it to say, if you break the rules, there are penalties. So let's just finish up with a quick recap on what we've learned. So let's imagine you're a company based in the US, so that's where your business operations take place. So you might be thinking, phew, we don't need to worry about GDPR. But no, it doesn't matter if you're not physically based in the EU. The GDPR rules will apply if you're offering goods or services to people in the EU, or even if you're just capturing some of those online identifiers, such as IP addresses and cookie information and whatnot. So then you say to me, no, we don't actually capture names and addresses, only, for example, postal codes and dates of birth. Well, you know the answer to this. If that's enough to uniquely identify a particular individual in the EU, then sorry, you can't escape it. GDPR will apply. So although we have got more to learn about GDPR, for now, we can see that it's certainly a good thing for building trust and transparency. With your EU customers.
Alright. One request, not for today. Please make a video where you're describing OBS scenes and how you're switching...
As we start to learn more about...
between them. Okay, I will. In fact, I have created some for our trainers. I'll have to look and see if they're specific to how I do the stuff for doing CBT Nuggets videos. But yeah, I will happily talk about how I switch scenes up and stuff. Do you mean specifically for the for the live stream or for creating videos as well? Just curious. And with that, I'll wait for your response while I look at the next video.
GDPR, there are some specific terms and roles that get referred to, and so in this video I'd like us to tackle some definitions and understand who's who when we talk about data privacy. And so this will mean that as you read more surrounding material about GDPR, you're going to know what or who they're talking about. So we already know that if you process the personal data of EU residents, then you are subject to GDPR, but since we're talking about definitions here, let's just tie that down properly. So what type of organisations are in scope for potentially being subject to GDPR? Well, do you know what? Pretty much everyone. So that's organisations of all sizes, from all sectors and all industries, they're all in scope, and they will be subject to GDPR if they have a presence in an EU country, or if they process the data of EU residents. But look, don't forget that GDPR still applies if your organisation is actually based outside the EU and you're processing that personal data, or even if you're doing it on behalf of another company. Now let's look at some roles which GDPR defines. You can see them here, and of course we'll go through them one by one, starting with the data subject, which we can define as the individual whose personal data is being collected or held or processed, and of course, more specifically, that's going to mean those EU folks who are using the goods and services provided by the data controller, and they are the team or the person or the organisation who determines the purpose and the means of the personal data processing. And you guessed it, that data processing is done by our next role, the data processor. And don't forget, this processing could be done by a subcontractor or some other third party. And our final role here is the data protection officer, who is responsible for the organisation's data protection strategy. Oh, that sounds so grand, doesn't it? But this is to ensure that the organisation stays compliant with GDPR requirements. But actually, not every organisation needs one of these. GDPR only requires you to appoint one if you're a public authority, or you engage in large-scale, regular and systematic monitoring of data subjects, or large-scale processing of sensitive personal data such as health or race or religion, just as a couple of examples. So our next who's who is who enforces GDPR. Well, actually, each EU member state designates an independent public authority to be responsible for monitoring and enforcing GDPR in their area and for issuing the appropriate fines for non-compliance. So, for example, here in the UK, that would be the Information Commissioner's Office, or the ICO, and in France, it would be the CNIL in Paris, and so on. Right, let's wrap up with a quick example, just to check that you have understood these different roles. We will imagine that we're a small chain of local coffee shops here in the south of England, and we've just set up a loyalty scheme. So it's one of those cards which you have to get zapped every time you buy something, and customers need to register to activate it. So yes, personal data is absolutely being gathered, and because we're only a small company, we've outsourced the data collection to a company who specialises in this kind of thing. So the first question, who are the data subjects? Yep, you got it, it's the customers who sign up to the loyalty programme. Who is the data controller? Well, that's us, the coffee shop owners. And the specialist company we outsource the data processing to would of course be the data processor. But do you think that we need to large-scale systematic collection of data, nor collection of sensitive data, so I'm going to say probably not. And finally, who will monitor our application of GDPR? Well, we're in the UK, so that's going to be the ICO. And that's your summary of the different roles defined in GDPR.
Oh.
GDPR outlines... As we start to learn more about GDPR, there are some specific terms and roles that get referred to, and so in this video I'd like us to tackle some definitions and understand who's who when we talk about data privacy. And so this will mean that as you read more surrounding material about GDPR outlines 7...
All right, let's see. Livestream, current setup, chat, normal window, kitchen can. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll talk about how I go about doing it. I'll also be specific too about audio video sync, because while setting up the scenes is not difficult, getting all of the cameras to work with a single microphone is challenging. And if you remember the first few weeks, the audio in the kitchen was a different microphone because getting them to sync up was frustrating. It's really easy to delay the audio. However, the problem was I could delay the audio so that this camera and this microphone synced up. The problem was the other camera was so much more delayed that if I delay the audio, but I also had to delay this video. And otherwise, I couldn't, the other camera wasn't fast enough. So what I have to do is delay this audio by a lot, delay this camera by a little, and this camera by a lot, and delay the camera in the kitchen by a little to make sure that they all sync up. That was actually the most complicated part, was getting all of the audio and video to sync on multiple cameras. The big issue is that the kitchen camera is an IP camera, and so it has a far greater delay than the one in here. So anyway, yeah, I will happily talk about all that because one, it's fun, but yeah, it hopefully can be useful as well. So I will do that, and I'll upload the video to YouTube, so it'll be something for me to create for YouTube as well. All right, back to listening to my British friend.
Key principles, which are going to lie at the very heart of your organisation's approach to processing personal data. Now here they are, and of course we'll go through them one at a time, but I have to say, I just love these principles. They just feel so right, and I hope that by the end of this video, you're going to feel the same way too. So let's start with lawfulness, fairness and transparency. And although it's just one principle, it's a whopper. It's 3 things in one. So let's start with the lawfulness bit. This means that you must have identified a good reason, or perhaps I should say valid grounds or a valid lawful basis for collecting and using personal data. Now the GDPR does list what it counts as being valid lawful grounds, and you guessed it, we'll cover that detail another time, but it's going to be things like consent or legal obligation and whatnot. The lawfulness bit also means that you don't do anything with the personal data that is generally unlawful, so no breaching of any other laws or regulations or whatever. The fairness bit of this principle is, I think, a bit trickier to tie down, because even if you are, strictly speaking, being lawful, you might not be acting fairly. So this means you should only be handling the personal data in ways that people would expect. You should be misleading about what you're using the data for, and you should consider how it's going to affect the interest of the data subject. So yeah, pretty tricky to tie down, and as you might imagine, there is much discussion on how to define this idea of fairness. But really, we're just saying, don't be devious about your data processing. And I think this is going to overlap onto our last bit of this principle, which is transparency. And this is simply about being honest and open and clear right from the start about why you need this personal data and what you're going to do with it. And you need to use clear language while doing so, and that means not hiding behind legal jargon. I know it's a lot to take in, but it is good stuff, isn't it? I feel very reassured that these regulations are in place to stop organisations abusing my personal data, and you will see that we'll be able to get the gist of the remaining principles much more quickly. That first one was a whopper. Anyway, principle number 2, purpose limitation. And this says that you must have clearly identified your purpose for processing the data. That means that you've got to have specific reasons for doing so. You can't just merrily collect personal data for no reason. And you need to make sure that you've documented these purposes and included the details in your privacy policy. Now, if you've not come across the idea of a privacy policy before, this is the legal document which purposes, and so you don't hold more data than is necessary. Principle number 4, another straightforward one, is accuracy. And as you might imagine, this requires that you ensure the personal data that you process is accurate. And yeah, I'm hoping that anybody who needs to use my personal information, well, I'm hoping that they've got it right. Our next principle is storage limitation. So you mustn't keep the personal data for longer than you need it. No hanging on to it just in case it might be useful in the future. No hoarding. So no, you need to think about and be able to justify how long you keep the data in order to fulfill those original purposes for which it was collected. Principle number 6 is integrity and confidentiality, which sounds terribly grand, but basically this equates to security. So you must ensure that you have appropriate security measures in place to protect the personal data that you hold, and that's going to include protection against accidental loss or damage, or unauthorised or unlawful use and whatnot. Now, the GDPR does not define the specific security measures that you have to have in place. It requires you to have appropriate safeguards, and that's probably going to be a combination of technical measures and organisational processes. And finally, accountability. And this kind of wraps up everything that we've said so far by saying that you must have appropriate processes and records in place to be able to demonstrate your compliance with each of the principles that we've just talked about. So you need to take responsibility for what you do with that data and how you comply with the principles. So can you see why I love these so much? They are so splendid, aren't they? I mean, it's sensible stuff, and I feel really happy that my personal data is being processed in accordance with these 7 principles of GDPR.
That's a tough quiz. All right. Oh, that's incorrect. And no clues about what's incorrect. Storage limitation.
GDPR outlines 7 key principles, which are going to lie at the very heart of your organisation's approach to process.
Oh my gosh. I can't. So when I
and how you comply with the principles. So can you see why I love these so much? They are so splendid.
Oh my gosh, I have to start over? Oh, this is horrible. Okay. All right, go time. idea what I did wrong before, but whatever. Alright, let's see. I know GDPR. Yeah, so I am not familiar with GDPR. I mean, conceptually, but apparently I'm learning more and more about it. That's the assignment today. Discovered. The nice thing, Cody, if you are a CBT Nugget subscriber, the nice thing is that Simone is a lovely instructor, and she's pleasant to listen to. And she has great animations and stuff. So, anyway. Do Linux to a server called Ubuntu DDE Remix. Deep in desktop environment. Huh. I've never heard of DDE before, so that's interesting. Vikram, hello. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm doing training myself, so it's a little bit different day. But between videos, I'm trying to stop and chit-chat. So I'm excited for 2004 to come out officially, Cody. Not even the desktop so much as the server. A lot of my servers, shamefully, are still running 1604. My voice is too low? It appears to be good. I'm bouncing the little thing. Check, check, check. I mean, I can turn it up a little bit, maybe. Oh, audio's good? Okay. Sorry, Vikram, maybe turn it off and turn it back on. That's the standard. That's the standard thing, right? All right. I'm going to get back, but yeah, I'm looking forward to 2004 because my servers, a lot of my servers are running. Here, I don't know, that's weird. Check, check, 1, 2, 3. This is the new microphone that's on my face with me. Check, 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 check. This is not the right thing, apparently. Is this better? Check, check, check. Ah. Okay. I think I found the right knob. I can't see it. This looks good, though. I'm like hitting yellow, so hopefully... Oh, oh. The only thing now, it appears to be picking up a lot of background noise. I don't know. If it gets bad, let me know. If it's too loud, let me know. And if it's picking up too much background noise, let me know. Anyway, I'm going to do another one, and then I'll chit-chat some more.
Aren't they? I mean, it's sensible stuff, and I feel really happy that my personal data is being processed in accordance with these 7 principles of GDPR. In this video, I'd like us to have a quick look at what the GDPR lists as the 6 lawful bases for processing personal data. Now, there is potential to tie ourselves in legal knots with this topic, but you know I'm not offering you legal advice here. I just want to give you the layman's overview. Over a nice cup of tea. How does that sound? Okay, we already know from the GDPR principles that personal data must be processed in a lawful manner, which means you've got to have a valid legal reason for collecting it. And luckily, the GDPR lists 6 lawful bases, you can see them here, and no single basis is better or worse than the others, but you've got to make sure you choose the appropriate one for your purpose. But anyway, you guessed it, we're going to quickly run through these one at a time, starting with consent. Now, consent means that the data subject has actively agreed for you to process their personal data for the specific purpose that you have identified. And this is probably the most obvious legal basis of them all, and I think it's also the easiest one with which to demonstrate compliance. But anyway, if you do opt for consent as your legal basis, be aware that you've got to show that you are offering individuals real choice and control, and that requires a positive opt-in. So you cannot use pre-checked boxes, nor one of those statements that says something like, by continuing to use this website, you are consenting to, blah, blah, blah. You know the ones I mean. So no, you must be able to show that the individual has explicitly opted in by checking a box themselves, for example. Next on our list is contract. So you can use this as your lawful basis if you need to process an individual's personal data in order to deliver a contractual service to them. For example, let's say that somebody has purchased something online, then of course you need to process the address in order to deliver what's been ordered. But note that the processing must be necessary. If you could reasonably do the job with less data, then you can't use this lawful basis. So continuing to use this online shopping example, you couldn't also capture the individual's birth date in order to send them a small promotional birthday gift or something, because that data was not necessary in order to fulfill the contract, which was of course the original online purchase. If you did want to capture extra data, then you would need to use consent. Next on our list is legal obligation, and this could be used as a lawful basis if you're processing the data in accordance with another law, or maybe a court order or something. And as before, the processing must be necessary. If you could reasonably comply with this other law without processing the personal data, then this basis is not going to apply. And I think generally it's going to be wise to seek legal advice if you're going to rely on this basis, because we've kind of got laws within laws here, and that's not for the layman to untangle. What about vital interests? Now, you're likely to be able to rely on this as your lawful basis if you need to process the personal data of somebody in order to protect their life. But note, this is only applicable if the person is incapable of giving consent. So I guess this is going to most likely apply when the person can't give consent, probably in the context of some sort of emergency medical scenario, for example. And if in doubt, you should really try, if at all possible, to obtain consent rather than relying on this basis. The public task basis is usually going to apply to governments and other public authorities and whatnot, and historically they have always had regulations regarding how they deal with the data of the people that they look after. So yeah, you could use this basis if you are a government department or something and you're processing personal data. And although it is most relevant to public authorities, it could, in theory, apply to any organisation that is performing a specific task in the public interest that is set out in law, but you really should probably seek legal advice to see if that's going to apply to you. And finally, we have the legitimate interests basis, and this is described as the most flexible lawful basis for processing, so that does potentially make it a bit of a catch-all, but beware, you cannot assume that it will always be the most appropriate, nor the easiest in terms of proving compliance. So the official wording from the ICO website is as follows. It is likely to be appropriate where you use people's data in ways that they would reasonably expect and which have a minimal privacy impact. And they also say, if you choose to rely on legitimate interests, you are taking on extra responsibility for considering and protecting people's rights and interests. So I have to say, I think this is a tricky one. It's the one most open to interpretation, which worries me a bit as a layman. And you can see this snippet from the same website here with this 3-point checklist saying that we need to firstly identify a legitimate interest, and then show that processing is necessary in order to achieve it, and then balance all of that against the individual's interests. Let's wrap up with a quick reminder of what we've looked at. Firstly, we had consent, which was where the individual has actively agreed for you to process their data. Then we had contract, where you need to process data in order to deliver a contractual service. Legal obligation was where you are processing the data in accordance with another law. And then vital interests was where you are protecting somebody's life. And then we have public task, which usually only applies to governments and other public authorities. And then finally, legitimate interests, that was the flexible catch-all one. And that's your summary of the 6 legal bases for processing personal data.
Oh, I got it right in the first try. Yay me! Alright, let's see what's going on. Am I still using Puppet? No. Or am I using Puppet? No. So here's the deal. I like Puppet. I used it specifically when I was learning it so that I could train it. But no, I am not using Puppet at all right now. For any automation tasks I use, I tend to use Ansible. It thinks the same way I do, and it uses SSH, which is, again, it's just, my mind works in an Ansible sort of way. So any automation I do tends to be Ansible, or admittedly, a lot of my automation is still cron jobs, which is not ideal. But, oh, my wife is, I'm like, I hear somebody else here, but my wife is FaceTiming with somebody. Anyway, is everybody streaming these days? I'm in a conference call. I'll be back as soon as I can. All right, Lewis, we'll see you soon. I'm going to be here training. I'm going to actually fill up my coffee cup and my water bottle before I start the next video. So even though the message is going to say that I'm going to the bathroom, I'm probably not. But hello, hello. All right. Next up.
In this video, I'd like us to briefly look at how special category data and criminal offence data are protected under GDPR. But first of all, what is special category data anyway? Well, this is the list appearing here, and you can see that this personal data is more sensitive than just your name and date of birth or whatever, and so needs more protection. And so this is what the GDPR classifies as special category data. And yes, it It does make sense that this type of information needs extra consideration because it could potentially put the individual's fundamental rights at risk, by exposing them to the risk of unlawful discrimination, for example. Notice that genetic and biometric data is included in the GDPR definition, which is actually a change from the regulations which GDPR replaces, and also note that data relating to criminal offences and whatnot are not listed here as special category data. They are treated separately, as we will see later on in this video. Now, in order to lawfully process this special category data, you need to not only identify a lawful basis, but in addition, you must specify a separate condition for processing the special category data. So the lawful basis bit applies to all personal data, of course. That's the valid legal reason for collecting the data in the first place, and we cover that in a different video. But here's a summary. These are the 6 lawful bases that you can use, and these are listed under Article 6 of the GDPR. But in addition to that, because it's special category data, you must also identify a condition, which are listed separately under Article 9. Now, normally, I wouldn't bother you with the detail of which article these are listed under, but I need you to be clear that these are 2 separate requirements, a lawful basis under Article 6 and a condition under Article 9. Now, there are 10 conditions for processing this special category data, and you know what? I think listing and examining them all is a step too far for us today, and so I will leave you to look up the detail if you need it. But suffice it to say, many of them do align with the lawful bases listed in Article 6. For example, there's one around explicit consent, another around vital interests, and there are a couple of extra ones relating to public health and preventative medicine and whatnot. Now, the point I want to make is that the legal basis you choose from Article 6 and the condition you choose from Article 9 do not have to be linked. For example, if your lawful basis is consent, then you are not restricted to using explicit consent as your condition for processing the special category data, although in reality there are many cases where there will be a link between the two, but it's not a requirement. So I briefly mentioned before that data relating to criminal offences is not merely bundled into the special category data that we just looked at. It has got separate safeguards. But the principle is that, again, you have to have identified your lawful basis for processing under Article 6, like we saw before, so consent or contract or vital interest or whatever. But in addition, you need to comply with Article 10. You can see the relevant snip here if you're really interested, but the summary is that you need to be processing the data in an official capacity. And I think that's fair enough. So once again, the GDPR comes up trumps with special provision for the protection of these sensitive data types. Yet another reason why I love GDPR.
Hey, I got it right. Yay me! Oh, it's gonna pause.
In addition to
Alright. Nothing going on over with you guys, so next video.
providing that series of principles for the organisations collecting or processing personal data, the GDPR also specifies individual rights. So these are the rights for the data subject whose personal data you're collecting. Now, I know you're going to worry that this is going to make life difficult for your organisation, but if you're already following the GDPR principles and whatnot, then you're well on the way there already. So you can see a few clues as to what these rights might be from my little pictures up here, but you know the routine by now. Let's run through them one at a time. So this first one you will very often see described as I have done here, the right to be informed. But actually, this is a summary of 3 different points from the GDPR. Now, I think a summary is exactly what we need today, but I just didn't want you to be surprised if on other lists you see this one described slightly differently. But anyway, this right says that individuals have the right to be informed about the collection of their personal data and how it will be used. But doesn't this sound familiar? Do you remember our 7 principles of GDPR? Well, the first one was lawfulness, fairness and transparency. And this right to be informed, I think, really is a manifestation of the transparency bit of that principle. So you've got to make it clear what your purposes are for collecting or processing the data in the first place, what your retention policy is, and if you will be sharing it with anybody else. And you're going to be providing this information through your privacy policy, which should be easily accessible, concise and should use clear and plain language. This next one, right of access, means that anybody can ask you if you hold any of their personal data, and if you do, you guessed it, they have the right to access it. And in common with many of these rights, you've got 1 month to respond to such a request, although there are some circumstances where that time could... Now, I think
I started
this is
daydreaming.
exactly what we need today, but I just didn't want you to be surprised if on other... You can see a few clues as to what these rights might be from my little pictures up here, but you know the routine by now. Let's run through them one at a time. So this first one you will very often see described as I have done here, the right to be informed. But actually, this is a summary of 3 different points from the GDPR. Now, I think a summary is exactly what we need today, but I just didn't want you to be surprised if on other lists you see this one described slightly differently. But anyway, this right says that individuals have the right to be informed about the collection of their personal data and how it will be used. But doesn't this sound familiar? Do you remember our 7 principles of GDPR? Well, the first one was lawfulness, fairness and transparency. And this right to be informed, I think, really is the manifestation of the transparency bit of that principle. So you've got to make it clear what your purposes are for collecting or processing the data in the first place, what your retention policy is, and if you will be sharing it with anybody else. And you're going to be providing this information through your privacy policy, which should be easily accessible, concise and should use clear and plain language. This next one, right of access, means that anybody can ask you if you hold any of their personal data, and if you do, you guessed it, they have the right to access it. And in common with many of these rights, you've got 1 month to respond to such a request, although there are some circumstances where that time could be extended, and you usually cannot charge a fee to deal with such a request. This one here says that individuals have the right to have inaccurate data rectified or completed if it's incomplete. And as before, you have 1 month to respond to such a request, and again, that time could be extended if the request is complex. And if you remember our 7 key principles of GDPR again, this one closely aligns with the accuracy principle, which I'm sure you remember requires that you ensure that the personal data you process is accurate. Right to erasure is sometimes referred to as the right to be forgotten, which I quite like, but this gives the individual the right to have personal data erased under certain circumstances. And I know what you're thinking. Give me some examples of such circumstances. Well, it could be when the data is no longer necessary to fulfill the original purpose for which it was collected, or if the individual withdraws their consent and there is no other legal reason why you need to keep it, or if the data was unlawfully processed in the first place. You'll also see here that there will be some circumstances where the request can actually be refused, and if the data has been disclosed to third parties, then unsurprisingly you must tell them about the erasure too. Right to restrict processing is another one which summarises more than one point in the GDPR, but we know that summary level is good for us today, so we'll go with it. But basically, this is saying that individuals do have the right to request the restriction or the suppression of the processing of their personal data. Now, much like the right to erasure, this only applies in certain circumstances, and note that when processing is restricted, you might still be able to store the data, but not use it. The right to data portability gives individuals the right to obtain and reuse their personal data across different services. And by that I mean from one IT environment to another, the suggestion being that this has the potential to allow consumers to take advantage of other applications which can use this data, maybe to get a better deal on their utility bills or their banking services or whatever. Now, again, there are some conditions for when this right applies, but your organisation should be ready to provide the data in what we would describe as a machine-readable, I was doing air quotes there, but a machine-readable format, so something like a CSV file as opposed to a PDF, for example. With the right to object, individuals have the right to object to the processing of their personal data, again, in certain circumstances, so there are some conditions attached to this right. But if the objection is with regards to direct marketing, then you must stop immediately. This is what is referred to as an absolute right. There are no conditions or grounds for you to refuse that kind of objection. And also note that you must inform individuals clearly about their right to object right from the start. And finally, we have this curious-sounding one called rights related to automated decision-making and profiling. So automated decision-making, if it isn't obvious to you, means that decisions are being made using an individual's personal data by automated means with no human involvement, which is why I do not have a person here manning my servers and my cogs. And profiling means automated processing of personal data to evaluate certain things about the individual. Now, again, there are some conditions associated with this, but you should potentially be ready to provide an easy way for the individual to request human intervention or to challenge a decision that's been made. Well, there we have it. That's all 8 that was on my list, but how many of them can you list using my little pictures here as clues? Okay, I'll be kind and I'll give you the summary. There they are, the individual rights for data subjects as defined by GDPR.
Ooh, boy, this is going to be a tough one. They're right. No, come on.
So you've now got a broad...
Alright. The right to have a personal data corrected or completed. Oh, it says I did it wrong.
to providing that series of principles for the fit. That's all 8 that was on my list, but how many of them can you list using my...
disagree with that one. That wasn't great. But, alright, let's see. Alright. I think we're about to finish up this section, so I might just keep going. I lost my mouse. Alright.
We've got a broad understanding of what the GDPR is, and that's all you need for your role in the organisation, right? Well, yes, but I would like to kind of round out what we've talked about with some thoughts about how being GDPR compliant might change some of your processes, because a requirement of GDPR is that you are able to demonstrate your compliance. Now, this might ring a bell because you might remember that one of our data protection principles is accountability, whereby you take responsibility for what you do with the personal data that you're collecting or processing, and also, there we go, you demonstrate compliance with each of the principles. And those principles, as a swift reminder, are just bouncing onto the side of my whiteboard now. But anyway, my point is, your organisation needs to implement appropriate processes and technical measures and whatnot in order to allow you to demonstrate, if required, that yes, you are ensuring the security of the personal data that you hold, and yes, you are only collecting the data that you need to fulfil your stated purpose, for example. So therefore, your organisation, at the very least, should have ensured a good level of awareness of personal data protection among staff, and that means buy-in at the management level and awareness all throughout the organisation, not just the lucky individual whose job it is to worry about such things. And you're going to need to have policies and procedures in place, and that's kind of obvious, because otherwise, how are you going to know how long your organisation keeps the data, or whatever? So your organisation will be keeping records of what you do with the data and why, and look, notice that GDPR compliance is an ongoing activity, not just a one-off box-ticking exercise. Your organisation will need to review and update your processes as required, and make sure that new starters are GDPR aware, for example. Anyway, that was the top-level overview, but the GDPR does suggest different things that you either could or should do to help you be accountable, and not all of them are compulsory, but you can see them here, and we'll very briefly run through them now, because it might help you to understand why your organisation is doing certain things in a particular way. Now, it is quite a long list, but we'll cover just a sentence or two on each, and we'll light them up in yellow one at a time. So yeah, one measure that you should take is implementing policies and procedures, which is absolutely going to help you be accountable. The idea of a privacy by design approach is that data protection should be completely integrated and embedded into your processes and your operations. It's not just an afterthought, it's at the very heart of how you do business. You might need a contract if your organisation is a data controller who is using a third-party organisation as the data processor, for example. And if this is the case, it makes good sense to formalise this relationship with the contract, so that everybody is clear what their data protection obligations are. Most organisations are required to keep records of their data processing activities, but also, as a bit of a bonus, keeping good records is going to make it easier to comply with other requirements of the GDPR. We know from the data protection principles that we must have appropriate security measures in place to protect the personal data that you hold. Now, the GDPR does not define the specific measures that you need to take. It requires you to have appropriate safeguards, and that's probably going to be a combination of technical measures as well as organisational processes such as security policies and recovery plans and whatnot. You need to be able to detect, investigate and document any personal data breaches that occur, and depending on the breach, you may need to report it to your local supervisory authority, and that would be the ICO here in the UK, and maybe even to the affected people too. A DPIA can help you to identify and therefore minimise data protection risks, and in fact it is a requirement that you do one if you're going to be carrying out processing which is likely to result in high risk to the individual's interests. It might be that your organisation is required to appoint a data protection officer, or a DPO. This is going to be somebody whose job it is to advise on GDPR and train staff and monitor compliance and monitor adherence to policies and procedures and whatnot. And finally, we're nearly there, maybe your organisation chooses to adhere to codes of conduct or get a certification. So it might be that a trade association, for example, draws up a code of conduct, or perhaps a certification body creates an accreditation of data protection compliance. But either way, if you go with it, these are both good methods of demonstrating compliance with the GDPR. So to wrap up then, accountability is officially a good thing in my book. It's going to help you be compliant, which was the focus of this video, but it's also useful if there's a problem. You'll be able to show what your policies are and what steps you've taken to be compliant, and that's going to reduce the risk of your organisation being fined, and the fines are substantial for non-compliance. But aside from that, accountability can give you a competitive edge in your field, because you can win people's trust by demonstrating respect for their personal data. And that's why you and your colleagues are watching this training, because everybody needs to take responsibility for complying with the GDPR. Or maybe you're watching because it's a really fascinating topic. It is most interesting. I mean, we've got those 7 data protection principles for 6 months.
Alright. Accountability measures. Oh dear. Yeah, you got it right. I should share one thing I found interesting or learned about GDPR when I get done with this training and before the end of the live stream. You know what? That is a good idea. That's a great assignment. I will do that. And I'll even put it in the chat. So if somebody doesn't hear me say it, they can see it.
My mum loves a sandwich, and so she was most excited about the idea of a loyalty card for her favourite sandwich shop, but the card had to be activated online. And she's not a very tech-savvy sort of lady, although I think we can let her off for that. She is 80. But anyway, she asked me to help her. And when we did it, I thought it was a really nice example of the principles of data protection, and so I rushed to get my own Subway loyalty card so I could register it myself and point out to you what I liked. So let's do it. Off we toodle to the Subway website, choose Subcard, and then register, and I will just fast forward through me entering in the card number and proving that I know what a traffic light looks like, and then I get to enter in my details. But I see this settings button over here on the left, so I click it, and oh, look, it's a privacy overview regarding cookies. And what I especially liked about this is what lovely, plain, clear language is being used. Even my mum just nodded wisely when she saw this. She wasn't blinded by any technical jargon, and she did feel quite comfortable. Anyway, let me just stick in my details. So now we're getting into the territory of personal information. So again, I'll just fast forward through the recording here. You will notice that I am 21 again. And let me just pop in a made-up mobile phone number and my demo email address. I'll enter in a password and confirm it and choose next. Now things are looking interesting. This is where I get to choose what communications I get from Subway. And again, I like the friendly tone of voice. And look, we've got a link to see how they're going to use my data. And I love the way this link is right at the top of the page here, close to hand. You know, it's not sort of hidden away at the bottom, buried under a million clicks. And then when we do click it, because yes, now that we know about GDPR, we're curious about these types of things. But you can see it's being very clear about who they are and whatnot. So, okay, that's fine. Let's just carry on with our preferences. But notice that none of these boxes are pre-checked. So I'm actively making my own choice here. Do you remember when we talked about active consent? So we like that. So I only want special offers and promotions, and let me just choose how I want to receive them. But what I really want to get to is their privacy notice. And again, see how accessible it is. Obviously, we've got to have a look because I think this is a lovely example of a privacy policy. So we've got an introduction here in plain English, and I think this is well formatted. It's easy to read, and I can clearly see who I need to contact if I do have a query. And then look, if I scroll down, I do not see an endlessly scrolling page of legal detail. No, I've got these really nice, well-formatted headings that I can expand if I want to. So how about this one? The personal data they collect. I mean, I filled in my name and my email address and mobile number and my date of birth too, I think, didn't I? How are they going to use that? And you know what? I really don't think that they could be clearer. They're explaining what they're going to do with my name and contact details and why they asked me for my postcode. And, yes, look, there we go. This is why they wanted my date of birth, because they don't collect children's data. Let's look at another section. How about this one? Retention and deletion of personal data. And yes, I like this too. It's explaining that if I don't use my subcard for 12 months, then my points go down to 0. No chance of that happening with my mother's card. But then 12 months after that, the personal data will be deleted. So yeah, good to know. I like this privacy notice. But anyway, let's get back to my card registration. I'll say yes, I agree to their terms and conditions, although of course I should have read them first, and click save. Good. But just one last thing to point out. I liked the way I was able to easily access their privacy policy while I was going through the process of giving them my personal data. But you should always be able to access that privacy information at any time. And on most websites, you will find a link down the bottom like this one here. And you can see that that takes us back to exactly the same privacy information that we saw before. Now, there are lots of other companies, of course, who have implemented the data protection principles nicely too. But this was a recent example from my experience this week. And even my 80-year-old mum felt that she understood what was going on and that her data privacy was being respected. Nice work, Subway. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.
Cool. No.
When they said to me,
Okay, I'm
my
frustrated.
mum loves a sandwich, and so she was most excited. But this was a recent example from my experience.
It's not easy to take one of our quizzes if you let it play to the end of the video. That's good to know. All right. Where will you very often find that privacy policy on a website? All right. No, I'm not gonna. I was going to. Oh, let's see. It's dinner for us. To say I'd like to thank you. Okay, so yes, the I'd like to thank you. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. Is the CBT Nuggets like catchphrase, and it started because our CEO Dan Charbonneau was the only trainer at first. It was a company that he started. He was a trainer, and he found at the end of a video he had a difficult time knowing how to end. Like he'd be like, "And okay, oh, there we go. Great. Thanks. Okay. Bye." Or whatever. And it was awkward. And so he kind of started this thing where at the end of every video, he would say, "I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing." So it's kind of become the CBT Nuggets catchphrase. And so, yes, every video ends that way. Although now our videos are much shorter. So it used to be that our videos were as long as they needed to be to cover a subject. I have some of my old videos, they've been retired now, but they'd be like 74 minutes long, right? I mean, like seriously long videos. And so at the end of that, you would say it, but there would be, right now, since our videos are between 3 and 5 minutes ish, it's saying it a lot of times. Now, I still do at the end of every video say that. Sometimes it'll just be printed at the end of a video instead of verbally saying it. But yes, that's our catchphrase, and it's at the end of almost every one of our videos. But now you know more than most people do about why. So, anyway. All right.
To me, "Hey Simona, you've done soft skills training. Could you create a respect in the workplace course? You know, a short course to remind people that they shouldn't harass their co-workers and stuff like that." And I said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And then I realised what a potential minefield this is. It's sensitive stuff. I can't give you legal advice, and the laws on this vary across the world anyway, so where on earth do I start? So I thought to myself, I'm going to have to be really clear on a few things here. So firstly, this course is not intended to give you legal advice. So neither I nor CBT Nuggets claim to be giving you legal advice here. And secondly, I've used some examples from my own personal experience here in the UK. So of course, these views do not necessarily represent the views of CBT Nuggets. So my objectives for this course are actually quite simple. I want to give you an appreciation of what we mean by diversity and inclusion and why that's a good thing, and what kind of behaviour might lead to a hostile work environment, which is, I guess, the opposite of a respectful environment. So I'm not going to be lecturing you on harassment laws and whatnot. I want to keep it light, keep it short, and ultimately give you some food for thought. Because, yeah, I reckon we would all prefer a healthy and respectful environment to work in. And yes, I reckon it's you that can make that happen. Oh dear. I'm now wondering if I should have found a group hug graphic that included a woman. And then I'm thinking, oh my goodness, is this inappropriate physical contact? Dilemma. I hope this has been informative for you, and
Yeah, it is funny how awkward it is to end a video. And so I used to make videos for Linux Journal every month. I would do a video intro for the magazine, and I didn't necessarily have a way to end, but I found month after month I would end up ending the same way. And I actually don't, it's been a couple of years now since I did it. I don't even remember how it would end. Um, oh, I do. So for more information, check us out at www.linuxjournal.com. We'll see you there. And that's how I ended every video, only because you have to have some way to end. It's funny that you have to have something so that you know you're ending and you don't keep going on and on and on and on, because you find yourself having a natural, conversation ending when you're having a conversation with a person, but when you're talking to a camera, the camera doesn't give you a lot of body language. So, anyway.
oh, now I do love a buzzword or a buzz phrase, and you can see I had a bit of fun here making up a fairly nonsensical sentence with as many as possible. But my question to you is, what is DNI? Does that acronym mean anything to you? Well, if you look it up, you'll find a number of definitions, but the one we need to tackle today, which has become a bit of a buzz phrase in the world of human resources, is diversity and inclusion. Sounds interesting. So let's tackle each part one at a time, starting with diversity, which by itself, as a word in the English language, simply means variety or mixture. And I know you know that. But in the context of D&I, it means the wide range of human differences. And you can see just some examples here. I could have added others too, but oh my, this just reminds me what I love about people. We're all different, and we all bring with us different perspectives, different skills, different experiences, and wow, that's why diverse teams can achieve amazing things. Now clearly, this bunch here, with all their differences, will have a far richer pool of experiences and expertise to draw on compared to, well, if we were all the same. So if diversity means increasing those underrepresented groups, what about the inclusion bit of D&I? Well, this means that all of those diverse people should feel as though they truly belong and can truly be themselves, that we all feel involved and worthwhile, and that our differences are recognised and, most importantly, embraced and respected. There's nothing worse, and I speak from personal past experience here, than kind of being the token woman hired especially to add diversity to a team. You know, feeling like you're always on the back foot, or always trying desperately to fit in, because being yourself doesn't ever feel quite good enough. So there we go. D&I stands for diversity and inclusion, with diversity being that wide range of human differences, and inclusion being that genuine sense of involvement and belonging where differences are respected. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.
Here we go. Oh, good. It also adds some professionalism to the video as well. Well, it depends on who is saying it and what they say. I've been accused of a lot of things. Professionalism is not usually one of them, he says in his pineapple-laden shirt. But yes, you're right.
So we already know that D&I stands for diversity and inclusion, with diversity meaning that fabulous broad range of human differences, and inclusion being that sense of belonging where differences are respected and embraced. But why should you care about D&I? Well, there are a few different approaches that we could take here, because clearly if you are in one of those underrepresented groups in a particular environment, then yes, you're really going to care about D&I. You're going to want your co-workers to accept you and respect you for who you are. Or I could take the heavy-handed approach and remind you that you could lose your job if you persecute somebody for being different or make their life difficult because of their differences. And depending on your geographical region, there's the no small matter of the law. We have to be inclusive, and quite right too. But it's more important, I think, to understand the value of diversity. And when we do that, it makes it really easy to understand why we should care about it. And there are lots of reasons, including compliance, why the HR folks in your organisation care about D&I. But what about the rest of us? Well, I've got 3 suggestions here which we will look at, starting with diverse teams perform the best. And I'm kind of guessing that you'd rather be part of a team that does well, rather than one that does poorly. And I've spent time working with groups of people doing team building exercises and whatnot, and I can tell you time and time again, it's the most diverse teams which come up with the most innovative solutions, and who develop stronger, more trusting bonds. A fabulous example I remember when I was helping to facilitate some team building events for young engineers, I remember one team had a pregnant lady wearing a hijab and another lady with a prosthetic leg, and given that the team tasks were fairly physical, at first glance you would think that this team had a bit of a disadvantage. And I also remember the team right next to them were all young, athletic males, looking rather smug, I must say. But it was what I'm describing as the more diverse team who created the most innovative solution which fulfilled the brief the best, and they seemed to have the most fun doing it. And the rather smug all-male team just seemed to get rather competitive and aggressive amongst themselves and just couldn't get a good solution together. So obviously, if diverse teams perform better, then that's good for business. But not only that, diversity does also increase sales because you have a better understanding of your customer base. It means you can better serve your customers because you understand their perspective. And it might even help your organisation grow market share by being able to access new markets. Now, this might not affect you directly if you don't work in a customer-facing role, but hey, if your organisation is more successful, then that's kind of useful for the security of your job. And I have just a tiny example where I can relate to this, because when I was young, my mum had a pretty comprehensive car accident which put her in a wheelchair for about 6 months while she healed, and I was her primary carer. So I got pretty nifty at handling wheelchairs and all of the challenges that brings. And so when I got my first Saturday job as a sales assistant in a department store, I was really comfortable whenever I needed to help a wheelchair user, because some of my colleagues just panicked and didn't know what to do. So having exposure to more diversity will give you new perspectives. And finally, caring about diversity and inclusion is simply the right thing to do. Clearly, if we're recruiting all of our team members from just a subset of the population, for example, white men, which is only about 31% of the population in the US, then that's silly. It's clearly the right thing to do to recruit the best people from the whole population. But not only that, if you're a white American male watching this, you might be thinking, yeah, still not really sure how this affects me. But boy, when your daughter announces that she wants to be a space scientist, you're going to really hope that she fulfills that dream and that she never feels she's excluded from that profession just because she's a girl. So there we go. I hope I've managed to convince you that diversity, as well as embracing and welcoming that diversity, is a good thing, and that's why we should all care about it. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. We know that we can't go around making other people's lives difficult because of their differences. We need to respect and embrace diversity. So yeah, we get that. But does that mean if I tease or joke with a colleague that I'm harassing them? Help me out here. So, my goodness, I'm not going to lie, this is a really tricky topic with, I think, lots of grey areas. And I could just simply say to you, oh, all you need to do is concentrate on your work, stay professional, and be pleasant to everyone, and you'll be fine. You know, just sit in a corner all day and smile benignly. And yes, behaving like this would absolutely keep you out of trouble from a harassment point of view, but real life's not like that. Inevitably, we'll be having a laugh, we'll be interacting with our colleagues on a level which isn't solely about the work we're doing, and that's where things can start to get tricky. So let's start with defining what we mean by the word harassment. Now, if you look it up in the dictionary, you'll find that the word harassment covers a wide range of behaviours of a generally offensive nature, and a generic definition might be something like this: aggressive pressure or intimidation. And there's a kind of physical or violent undertone to that, isn't there? And you might be thinking, well, that's no problem, I'm not aggressive or violent or whatever. But actually, if we dig deeper and understand what harassment means in the workplace, you'll find definitions along these kinds of lines, where harassment is described as being unwanted behaviour which you find offensive or which makes you feel intimidated or humiliated. And the so-called harasser doesn't even have to necessarily have the intention to harass, it's all about how it's received. Wow, so now we see the problem. Something that you think is teasing or just having a laugh could actually make somebody feel stupid or humiliated. And you know, I can relate to this. I hate being teased, I hate feeling stupid, I blush easily, and that makes it even worse. Oh. And there's a fine line between teasing and harassing, and where that line is really quite subjective. And I've got an example actually from the workplace of one of my friends here in the UK. So it might not be the same in your region, but here in the UK, the expression cheeky monkey is used to mean a kind of lovable rascal, usually in the context of children, and you'll find any number of children's services and products using the expression cheeky monkey. So apparently in jest, my friend's co-worker says to their colleague after a bit of joking around, oh, don't be such a monkey. And I think you can guess where I'm going with this. The recipient of that comment didn't find it funny at all, and in fact it got escalated, and yes, the co-worker who used the term monkey lost their job because of it. So this is really important stuff. And in the US actually, there is this term protected classes, which is really useful to help us focus the mind a little. And you can see these protected classes here, but the idea is, in the US, harassment is defined as unwelcome conduct that is based on these factors. And I think most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but do note that the sex class here includes pregnancy, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And the other less obvious one is genetic information, so we shouldn't treat somebody less favourably because of, say, their family medical history, for example. Now, if you are based in the US, I will leave you to learn more about this, but I think for all of us, it's useful to see where potential sensitivity could lie in the context of harassment in the workplace. Let's look specifically at sexual harassment now. So this will include, probably obviously, unwelcome sexual advances or requests for sexual favours. You know what I mean here. She only gets the promotion if she sleeps with the boss. And you might hear this referred to as quid pro quo sexual harassment. It can also include any verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature, so inappropriate touching's got to be an obvious example. But it doesn't have to be of a sexual nature. It could be offensive remarks about a person's gender in general. And oh, don't forget that although I've used pretty stereotypical examples here of men sexually harassing women, in the US, some 15% of sexual harassment claims are actually filed by men. So I think all of us could use a bit more sensitivity in the workplace. You know, think twice before you repeat that outrageous joke from the comedy club performance you saw at the weekend. And remember, something that you think is a joke or just teasing could make somebody feel intimidated or humiliated, and that could end up being harassment, and that's no joke. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. Am I biased? Does that make me a bad person? Well, the answer to that is yes and no. We all have biases, and no, they needn't make you a bad person. Let me explain with a recent example from my life. So I had a medical issue earlier on this year, and fabulous though the National Health Service is here in the UK, you don't always get to see the same person about your condition. So I must have been on my third or fourth consultation, having had a variety of tests and scans and whatnot, and this very nice, very compassionate and very caring young lady was giving me my diagnosis and telling me that I would need to have an operation. Now, I'm sure this lady did introduce herself, but I was probably too anxious to process it. But I found myself wondering what her role is, and I thought, well, she's probably not a nurse because she wasn't wearing a uniform, but was she the radiologist or a doctor, or maybe she was a cancer care counsellor? Anyway, no matter. I asked her when she thought I might be able to have the operation, and she gave me her business card and told me to contact her secretary to schedule it in. So she was the surgeon. My goodness, clearly I have a bias here. I did not expect a young woman to be in that role. And I'm ashamed to say, I think if I'd been having that same conversation with an older man, I probably would have just assumed that he was the surgeon. And it made me feel awful to realise that I had this bias. But it didn't mean, I don't think, that I thought this lady couldn't do the job. In fact, I had great confidence in her, and I was delighted with her work. So what on earth was going on in my brain there? And actually, if you look up the word bias in the dictionary, it continues to make me feel bad about my bias by defining it as an action of supporting or opposing a particular person or thing in an unfair way. But do you know what? We all have biases. It's simply the way our brains are wired, and we all have them. And as that definition says, they can be negative or positive. Actually, they can be very helpful, in fact, in allowing the brain to make shortcuts to help us make quick decisions in dangerous situations or when we're stressed or when we simply don't have enough information. But those biases can turn into problems when they cause us to have kind of negative associations for other people in certain situations. So we've really got to be ready to explore just how our biases influence our thoughts and the consequences of them on everybody around us. So this is called unconscious bias, and by its very nature of being unconscious, it's actually quite hard to unwrap. And there are several different types of unconscious bias, and we'll whiz through just a few of them here to give you the idea, but it's a fascinating topic, and I urge you to look it up and learn more. But firstly, affinity bias is where you find yourself favouring people who remind you either of yourself or of somebody that you like. Our brain tricks us into seeing them as familiar and relatable, even before we get to know them. The halo effect is where your brain just can't help but fixate on one especially great feature about someone, and you find yourself thinking that everything about that person is fabulous, even if it isn't. And the horns effect is kind of the opposite to the halo effect, where we let just one attribute that we perceive to be negative to completely cloud our judgment. And finally, on my short list here, we have confirmation bias, which is where we have a tendency to actively seek out confirmation that our first impressions or our preconceptions were correct. And that means we might disregard information which contradicts it. It's all part of the human brain trying to make the world around us more understandable and more orderly. Now, we could go on talking about unconscious bias, but for today, I want you to be aware that we all have it. It's deeply entrenched. We might have biases around gender or religion or race or age or any number of other characteristics. And if we're not willing to accept that it will sometimes cloud our judgment, then that's going to cause us a problem in a diverse workplace. And you can see some examples here. But just acknowledging this is going to be a step in the right direction. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for the... We could go in many different directions when talking about cultural differences in the context of respect in the workplace, but in this video I wanted to focus on some of the different communication styles and values you might encounter with co-workers from different parts of the world. But don't forget that each one of us is a fabulous, complex kaleidoscope of factors which make up our overall personality, such as our values, our behaviours, our prejudices, our preferences and whatnot, and cultural background is just one of the factors in this kaleidoscope.
Sorry.
And you know what? I really love this analogy because it reminds me that we are all complex, we're all different, but every one of us is beautiful and brilliant. Anyway, it's a big wide world out there, and although we can't, and indeed shouldn't, stereotype people's behaviour based on where they are from, most of us do tend to grow up in just one neighbourhood where we learn what's normal behaviour and what's not, and so it's no surprise that that's going to be very different from where somebody else grew up. And to give you a quick example, I'm from the UK, and you probably know that it's completely normal for women to sunbathe topless if they want to on an ordinary beach in Europe. But that's not quite the case in the US, and frankly it's an absolute taboo in parts of Asia. And if you were a bit uncomfortable with me using that as an example, well, that might be an indication of the cultural differences between you and me. It's a minefield. Now, the sorts of difference in behaviours I'm meaning that you might encounter in the workplace might be things like this. So sense of humour, different levels of formality, directness of speech, different views on leadership, and differences in non-verbal communication. Now, there are more things I could have added to this list, but I thought I'd just give you some examples from my own personal experience. I'm sure you've experienced differences in sense of humour with people from different cultures. I know that I certainly noticed that with the rest of the trainers here at CBT Nuggets, not least in the spelling of the word humour. But I'm the only Brit, and I admit I don't always get their jokes. I don't always understand the popular references or the political references that they're using. And of course, sometimes when I make a joke, I don't always get the reaction I'm expecting. I can tell they think I'm just a tiny bit bonkers, or maybe I've been offensive in some way. I just don't know. But I've also been caught out by not using the appropriate level of formality for different cultures. Now, here in the UK, much like in the US and Australia, I would say we're pretty informal, and we would use first names in business most of the time. But to give you an example from my own experience, in France, it really is still quite common to refer to people as Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, or Monsieur and Madame, as the case may be. So what caught me out in France is that I thought I was being friendly and approachable by using first names, but actually I was just making the other person feel uncomfortable. And I noted that when I was doing some webinars for an Asian company, they referred to the chairman as Chairman Orlak, that's his surname, and not just by his first name. So that was a lesson for me. Directness of speech can catch you out too. I reckon that my US colleagues think that I'm sometimes rather scarily direct, but that's often the case in Europe. I think we have more of a tendency to say things as they are than perhaps people do in the US, so I do have to be careful not to offend. And also, what people are used to in terms of leadership styles will vary around the world too. And very often we see people in the Middle East and Africa and South America, and maybe even Southern Europe too, are much more used to a kind of a hierarchical leadership style, whereas in Scandinavia and Australia and Canada it's often quite the opposite. Now, non-verbal communication is a huge topic in its own right, but I just want to share a couple of experiences that have caught me out in the workplace. And firstly, a tone of voice. I can remember doing some training in a French call centre a while ago, and in the break room in between sessions I could hear a girl having a conversation on the phone, and she sounded really angry, and I whispered to my colleague, "My goodness, that's some humdinger of an argument she's having there." But actually, my colleague spoke better French than me, and she laughed and she said, "No, she's just having a really happy and animated conversation with a friend." And related to that, I've noticed in meetings in Southern Europe that people are far more likely to interrupt each other and talk over each other, but in Northern Europe they're much more likely to wait and listen, and I think that's related to how comfortable people are with silence, and that really varies a lot between cultures. And finally, touch. Now, I'm a reserved Brit, so for me, a hearty handshake is just fine. With anything else, I might get really uncomfortable. So you can imagine how I feel in France, where it's normal to kiss someone you greet on the cheek. But of course, my reticence to greet French people according to their culture can make me seem rude, or at best unfriendly. So there we go. Those are just a few examples of cultural differences in the workplace. And if we appreciate that there are differences, then we can be more tolerant and understanding of these different behaviours in the workplace. I think that if we ignore these factors, there is the potential to offend someone, or to be offended ourselves. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.
Ba-bum. Cody, I can tell you first off that it's interesting. So I'm an American working in an American company. I've been to two other countries, one that I can remember. Um, so I'm very, very American in how I approach things. And Simona, who's doing this training right here that we're watching right now, or that I'm watching, um, is a colleague now and I have a lot of conversations with her. I've been at headquarter meetings with her. We communicate online a lot, and it's been a real um, incredible growth experience for me. Sadly, she's taken the brunt of my purely Americanisms, um, but she's taken them in stride because she's a kind and patient woman. But it's been really interesting for me to see the differences in kind of the things she just talked about here. Levels of formality, directness. We tend to, as Americans, hem and haw around awkward things, and that's just not the case with a lot of other countries. Anyway, so you went into something, no, that or something that I had particularly got out of the training, and it wasn't GDRP or GRDP or whatever it is, but this was a particularly poignant video for me. So the biggest thing in Europe, they rarely say awesome. If you want to sound American, use the word awesome a lot.
Let's have a look at some scenarios and discuss whether they are appropriate or not, starting with physical contact. Now, you can see some examples appearing on the whiteboard now, and I'm hoping that it's really obvious to you that some of these are absolutely not appropriate, but maybe some of the others are a bit trickier. Now, I'm British, and frankly, I would not be comfortable with any of these examples of physical contact in the workplace. But hey, it's not all black and white. If somebody high-fives me, for example, I might not like it that much, but I'm certainly not going to accuse them of harassment. And it's going to vary depending on the scenario. For example, a kiss on the cheek on greeting is going to be much more appropriate in France than here in the UK. And some people are just simply more touchy-feely than others, and so some of this behaviour might be very natural to them, but could be deeply uncomfortable for the recipient. So do remember that even if it seems appropriate to you to make physical contact, it's how that touch is interpreted by the recipient that matters, not your intent. So you've got to be really sensitive to other people's personal space and different norms of behaviour in different parts of the world. So inappropriate physical contact could lead to a sexual harassment claim, but don't forget that sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual advances. So let's ponder this next example, and let's say that you regularly visit a client at their office, and the receptionist is super cute, and you pluck up the courage to ask her out on a date. She declines, but you're so keen that every time you visit the office you bring her flowers, you bring her chocolates, and clearly this is sexual harassment. She had declined the advances, but continuing this sort of behaviour can still get you into trouble, even if it's not in your own workplace. But romantic relationships do sometimes emerge at work. That's life, but it can get tricky. What happens, for example, if the relationship ends? That's going to make the working day pretty uncomfortable. And don't forget that dating between bosses and subordinates may well be against your organisation's policy, so you're going to need to either steer well clear of such a potential relationship or speak to HR about moving to a different department or something. But whatever you do, tread carefully. Okay, let's look at some other scenarios now, and we'll start off with some examples here of blatant discrimination, and I'm hoping you'll agree that all of these comments are clearly disrespectful to the person or people involved. So we must not stereotype around gender or exclude somebody because of their disability or be disrespectful because of their race or religion or origin or any other of their differences for that matter. So I'm hoping that those examples were obvious. But what about, those jokes, those light-hearted comments, having a joke with your colleagues, that's okay, isn't it? Let's have a look at some examples. And I would say, please do not joke about sensitive issues such as gender and sexuality and religion and race and whatnot, even if it's about your own gender or religion. What you, and maybe some of your colleagues, might think of as a bit of fun could end up being offensive. So just steer clear of joking about these topics. And I really mean that. Even if you're 100% super confident that nobody in earshot will be offended, just don't do it. Not only will it help you stay out of trouble, but more importantly, it's simply not okay to keep sowing the seed of disrespect towards some of these groups of people. So let's break that habit of digging at people's differences and try and nurture an environment of respect. Gosh, that came out a bit more impassioned than I was expecting, but I hope you get what I mean. But I've also got another couple of examples here which are worthy of discussion. So clearly it's not appropriate to say to somebody, hey, your body looks really sexy in that outfit. But is it okay to comment on their body by saying something like, hey, you look like you've lost weight? Is that okay or not? Well, I think it depends. If you and your colleagues have got some sort of weight loss challenge going on and you're encouraging each other to eat healthily and lose weight, then yes, a comment like that is probably okay. But speaking from personal experience, when I bumped into a male colleague who I didn't know that well and I hadn't seen for a few months, and he said, you're looking great, have you lost weight? Now, I realise he was trying to pay me a compliment, and I really don't think it was a sexual advance on his part, but I didn't like the idea that he had noticed the shape of my body, and his comment did make me feel uncomfortable. So context is everything. And this last example here, I cringed only the other day when a colleague, making polite conversation to a black British cab driver, said to him something like, so, do you get to go back home very often? Meaning, I think, to his presumed family in Africa. And the cab driver said, in his broad Cockney accent, home is right here in London, mate. Good answer. But that sort of comment goes absolutely nowhere towards creating an inclusive environment. So do remember that bawdy jokes and banter can end up leading to a hostile environment. And let's remember that our definition of harassment is any behaviour which somebody finds offensive or which makes them feel intimidated or humiliated. So stay professional and stay respectful. Surely that's going to make the best working environment. And I think with all of these different scenarios we've looked at, to help you decide if they are appropriate or not, just ask yourself those two questions. Is it professional? Is it respectful? And that should give you your answer. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.
All right. I'm actually quite enjoying this. I like this stuff better than the GDRP stuff, only because it's more pertinent to me personally. I don't generally take people's information, but I tend to have an overactive sense of humor, so it's good for me to uh, be properly trained on what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And the topic of this next video is what is appropriate? How fitting? How appropriate? Oh no, it's handling harassment. I'm
Oh
sorry.
no, so you think you're being harassed? What should you do? Well, as the basis for this video, I've used the guidance provided by the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. You can see it here, but don't worry if you're based outside of the US, we will be talking in general terms. Anyway, you can see that there are various steps suggested, and I kind of reworked these into a flowchart, with the very first thing being, do you think that you could tell the harasser to stop? Do you think you could confront them? Now, when I use the word confront, I'm not necessarily meaning an all-out aggressive argument if that's not your style, but if you think it could be a possibility that you could address this yourself, I've got a few ideas for you to try as to how you could do that. Firstly, the least confrontational suggestion is to kind of change the dynamic of the moment and interrupt the unwanted behaviour. And you could do that by simply turning around and walking away. Or you could divert the behaviour by changing the topic. So, no, you're not confronting them, but you are sending a signal that the comment or the behaviour was unacceptable to you. And that's a good start, and it might be enough. If you feel able, though, or for more persistent harassers, you might want to get a bit more confrontational. You might feel able to question the behaviour. So if somebody says or does something which you find inappropriate, then you could say something like, help me to understand why you thought that was okay. And that might be all it takes to iron out the tricky situation. Or, similar to this approach, you could give the harasser a chance to correct themselves. And this is my favourite technique, by the way. And I suppose this is the most confrontational of all of my suggestions, so it depends on what type of person you are and what the situation is as to whether you feel you could say something like, I really don't think you meant to do that. I guess you thought I'd be okay with it, but I'm not. And you never know, the other person might be mortified at how their behaviour has been interpreted. But I think on very many occasions you probably won't be addressing the behaviour at the time that it happens. Either you're just so stunned by what's just happened and you don't think quickly enough to respond, or it might just not be appropriate. You know, you're not going to want to say something like this in response to a co-worker's comment during a client meeting, for example. So very often it might be a case of setting up a private meeting with that person and stating factually what happened and how it made you feel. Now, this all sounds so easy in theory, but of course, if you don't feel able to deal with the situation yourself, then you shouldn't hesitate to consult your organisation's anti-harassment policy. That is, if your organisation has got one, of course. And if not, you need to speak to somebody either in the HR department or a supervisor or a manager. It doesn't even have to be your own supervisor, but anyone with whom you feel comfortable talking who has some kind of supervisory or managerial role. You should explain what has happened and ask for their support in getting the behaviour to stop. Beyond that, if all else fails, find out what options you've got in your region for following through a complaint about harassment. For example, in the US, on the EEOC website I showed you before, there is more information here on your legal rights and what next steps you could take if required. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. Okay, so an inclusive environment is where everybody feels they can be their true, genuine self, and they have that sense of real belonging where their differences are respected. And I've got a few practical tips for you to help you be more inclusive. Firstly, let's remember that everybody has their own perspective on things. They see the world through their own lens, if you like. And I know you know this, but very often that's going to be different to your view. And that's okay. It doesn't have to mean that one of you is wrong. When you're working with your colleagues, the purpose is not to alter each other's opinion. And I challenge you, next time you have a difference of opinion, to make a conscious effort to see the situation from their perspective, through their lens. Oh, I know, it's really difficult in real life situations, but it is a habit you can cultivate. So practical tip number one for this nugget, rather than putting all of your effort into trying to get somebody else to understand your perspective, and hardly any effort into trying to understand their perspective, shift the balance. Put your energy into understanding their point of view. It's the same amount of energy expended, just distributed differently. And remember, you don't have to agree with someone in order to understand their perspective. Secondly, I'd like you to think of a situation in your past where you have experienced somebody else's unconscious bias, where you've been stereotyped. And this could be positive or negative or indeed neutral. And I'll give you some examples. So a few years ago, just before the council elections, a local politician came knocking on my door to canvass for my support. And his opening statement was something like this: I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that I'm opposed to the closing of the local primary school, and I'm committed to making sure it continues to get funding. And I can remember looking at him completely flummoxed. I genuinely did not know what to say to him. I knew nothing about plans to close the primary school. I don't have children, so this issue simply hadn't hit my radar. But because I was a woman of a certain age, living in what could be described as a family house, he assumed I'd be really interested in schools. And another time, many years ago, I remember going for my very first job interview, and the woman interviewing me, when she met me, she said something like, oh, thank goodness for that. We weren't sure if English would be your first language. So apparently, because of my slightly unusual first name, they had assumed that I might not be a native English speaker. And another time, I can remember somebody saying to me, well, we're not all sporty like you. Well, I am quite tall, and I'm quite slim, but put a ball in my hand and you'll see straight away that I'm certainly not sporty. So practical tip number two, think about when you were on the receiving end of somebody else's bias, and see if that can help you to understand what your biases might be, and hopefully correct them. And thirdly, you can be an ally. What do I mean by this? Well, if you look up the word ally in the dictionary, you'll see that yes, one of the definitions says that it's somebody who helps and supports somebody else. But in the context of diversity and inclusion, it's somebody who chooses to support efforts to improve things for a marginalised group of people. Say you might be a man who chooses to support women's rights, or I might be a childless woman who chooses to support mothers in the workplace, or you might be an able-bodied person who chooses to support people who are less so. So you get the idea. But the point is, if you're a white man, which is probably in many scenarios the most privileged and least discriminated against group of people, you might think that all you can do to be inclusive is to keep your head down and try to avoid offending anyone. But no, there's no reason why you can't proactively support and be an ally for a more disadvantaged group of people. And it would be so great if you did. So there we go, 3 tips to help you be more inclusive. Number 1, put more effort into understanding other people's perspectives. Number 2, see if you can uncover and hopefully correct your biases. And number 3, be an ally. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. So if we're all responsible for creating a respectful workplace, then surely, if I just treat everybody the way I would like to be treated, then I can't go wrong, right? Now, this assumes that everybody is the same as us, and to be fair, that's not a bad starting point. I mean, your own perspective is the one that you do understand the best, but we are all different, with different backgrounds, different experiences, different preferences, different prejudices and hang-ups, and different strengths and weaknesses and tastes, so I'm afraid it's not as easy as just treating others as we would like to be treated. So what can we do? Well, firstly, acknowledge that there are good ways of saying things and bad ways of saying things. The things that you say will have an impact on other people. You know, maybe the things you say will make them feel fantastic, or maybe they'll make them feel belittled and isolated. We all know somebody who's got a really cutting turn of phrase and can completely knock someone down with just a few words, and, well, you don't want to be that person in your workplace. So yes, the words you choose do matter. So what I'm trying to say is think before you speak. You know, limit your use of profanities and don't use derogatory terms. And it might sound obvious, but remember, you're in a place of work here. You're not down the pub with your mates, so keep your language professional and keep it respectful. And if you're having trouble deciding whether what you're about to say is appropriate, then think about how you would react if somebody said it to your mother, or to your partner, or to your child. Or how would you feel if what you had said was captured in a recording? Now sure, we all say things we regret, but take the time to consider whether the words you are using are the right ones. Now maybe you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm polite to everybody, I don't swear, I don't upset anyone, but there's just one more thing I'd like to make you aware of, because some types of harassment are glaringly obvious. You know, the blokes in the warehouse who jeer and catcall when a woman comes in, for example. But other types are much more subtle. Look at this example. 2 people are chatting here to their co-worker Dorothy, who has the physical appearance of being of African descent, and they all live and work in London. And Florence asks Dorothy, so where are you from? And maybe Charles asks something like, do you get to go home often? The subtext here being home to some presumed family in Africa. I think you know where I'm going with this. Dorothy is British, London is her home, and she's never even been to Africa. So Florence and Charles didn't really mean to offend Dorothy. They thought they were just making polite conversation, but it showed their bias. You know, their belief that somebody like Dorothy couldn't possibly come from England. And poor Dorothy, even though these comments just probably passed by, she gets yet another tiny little reminder that in the eyes of Florence and Charles, she's kind of like an alien in her own country. And we call these microaggressions, little tiny snubs or negative comments that all add up and eventually weigh you down. And I think of these microaggressions as like the rain. The odd drop of rain here and there you can just ignore, but eventually, if there are too many, you're going to get pretty uncomfortable. So if you do offend somebody, then you're going to have to do the grown-up thing and apologise. And we've got to do it properly. Let's look at this example. Buddy, I'm so sorry if I offended you, but I really didn't mean to upset you. I really don't like his use of the word if and but. Let me explain. A few months ago, I was doing a group exercise class at the gym, which involved the use of lots of equipment from racks at the back of the room. Now, at the end of the class, I was in a bit of a hurry to leave, so I tried to take all of my stuff back in one go, and I dropped an 8-kilogram kettlebell on somebody's foot. The poor woman screeched and took off her shoe to examine the damage, and can you imagine how mortified I was? I was beside myself. I was saying, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. How badly hurt is your foot? What can I do to help? Shall I drive you to the hospital for an x-ray? So that was my apology. I felt terrible, as I'm sure you would. But let's see how that apology looks if I add in the if and the but that I objected to in our last example. For a start, the if sounds like I don't quite believe that her foot is hurt, which is clearly ridiculous. I could see it turning black and blue before my very eyes. And the but is dismissing her pain by effectively saying, well, I didn't do it on purpose, and giving an excuse. So you can see in this example, an apology with if and but doesn't make sense. And it's just the same when you apologise for offending someone. Why would it be any different just because you can't see the damage? So apologise properly and sincerely with no if or but, and ask how you can put it right. Because at the end of the day, we are all responsible for creating a respectful workplace. It's the things that we say and the things that we do which create that environment. So let's make sure it's a good one. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.
All right, the next section is social engineering threats and vulnerabilities. I don't think this is going to be Simona. Oh, I was holding too still. My motion detector. Why? Come on. Turn back on. Stupid automation. Do it manually like an animal. Okay.
As we consider the best way or the easiest way for an attacker or a hacker to compromise a system, it's to get the
This is not Simona. This is Keith.
operation of someone who already has that access. In this video, I'd like to chat with you about social engineering and a specific technique called phishing that unfortunately is very, very effective for the attacker. And let's pick on Bob here for a moment. Bob is here at Computer 2. And let's also imagine that the group policy and the restrictions on Computer 2 aren't set up very well, meaning that Bob can not only log on to the domain in his local computer, but he also can install software. If an attacker, and we'll go ahead and use Joan out here as our attacker for this scenario, if Joan wants access to stuff inside this network, she would love to get access to Bob's computer, and then from there she can start scanning and working out from there. So what Joan could do is she could leverage social engineering. Now, in general, social engineering is the concept of tricking. Basically, tricking a user into doing something that's not in their best interest, like revealing a password or installing software that's going to be malware on their system, or anything else that would compromise the confidentiality or data integrity or overall security of Bob, his computer, and the network he's connected to. So one aspect of social engineering is to send malicious email, and this technique is referred to as phishing. Because the intent for Joan is to put this email out there that Bob will see and tempt him, like a fish, tempt him to strike or bite at that bait. So as we think about an email that Joan could send Bob with either an attachment or a link that would lead to some malicious site which would take him one step further to compromising himself, let's think about for a second in a phishing email, what are some of the things that might entice Bob to go ahead and either open an attachment or click on a link in that email? Well, one of those elements is an authority figure. If Joan can make the email look like it came from a bank or an institution or somewhere that Bob does business with and it looks official, Bob might be tempted to click on the link. Your account has had security warnings, or someone has tried to log into your account. Click here to solve. So that's one step, coming from an authority figure or an institution that Bob's trust already knows. There could be a fake risk of, hey, fix this now, it's urgent. Or maybe it's a limited time offer, something that is available only for the next hour or 45 minutes, and we're enticing Bob to click on it. And if through Joan's phishing email that Bob has acted on, she can get access, she can then use that access to get further into the network or compromise other systems. Another variant of a phishing email would be a vishing, V-I-S-H-I-N-G, a vishing phone call, where there's an inbound call. My dad, who's 90 now, he got one of these a couple years ago. My son was moving out of state, and somebody did a lot of great research because they called my dad and said, yes, your grandson, who's traveling to Oregon, has just had an accident. He's not dead, but he does have some medical challenges, and he needs some cash. And my dad, bless his heart, my dad said, you should call his parents. Click. And it's great because that's a great response. We should not entertain any kind of bogus inbound calls like that. And if we analyze that call, there was data. He had information on the call, specifics about my son, and that he was traveling. He had a sense of urgency. The caller did, saying there was action needed to be taken. And my dad didn't fall for it. Kudos to him for not falling for that. And by the way, there was no problem with my son traveling to Oregon. And when an attacker or a group of attackers do some intelligent research, and they're targeting, and they have specific information like your grandson or traveling to Oregon or other details, if it's email-based, that can be known as spear phishing. And spear phishing, even though it takes a little more work, can be more targeted. So for targeting a CEO or human resources department or finance department, if we include in that email details and other personal information that appear to be coming from somebody else or appear to have validation from some other party, even though it takes more work to get that type of phishing attack done, that spear phishing, sometimes that can be highly effective as well. All right, so the next question is, well, if these phishing attacks happen all the time, millions and millions of times a day across the globe, what can we do to help reduce the risk of our customers and our users actually falling for it and compromising themselves? Well, let's take a look at that right now. One of the things we can do to combat phishing attacks is put some barriers in between our users and the attackers who are generating these email messages. One of these could be an email filter. And we have this at the server level that's scanning through, and this email filter, the system, could be using intelligence from the cloud, knowing about domains and sources where malicious email is coming from, and simply dropping that traffic and not proceeding with it because it has a bad reputation. We can also have some real-time scanning happening, and that could be at the client's computer or at the email service in the cloud that's looking for anything that the client might be acting on. So if Bob does get an email and it does have a link and he does click on it, the scanning software on the local computer can say, whoa, based on that reputation of that site you're trying to go to, I'm not going to let you go. And reputation-based filtering in the browser is available on most commercial browsers today, including Edge, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and others. And then on top of that, we can also buy third-party products that also have that ability to do the scanning of where that user is trying to go. We can also have devices, firewall devices, and most next-generation firewall services support this, that are looking at categories and classifications of URLs that users are trying to go to, and we can stop it there. So the network-based firewall can go ahead and identify, whoa, what you're trying to go to is malicious. So this is an example of defense in depth to protect the user to our best ability from bringing harm to themselves. Another thing that can be done is to use a low-level privileged account when browsing the web. So if Bob is going out to the web and he's using a low-level privileged account, if he does hit something or tries to install something or run something, because he's browsing using very low privileges, he won't have a lot of ability to do too much if he does run into malicious content. Another layer that we could add in here would be DNS. If we're using secure DNS servers, they're also doing reputation-based filtering and not feeding back the IP addresses to Bob when he clicks on a link if that IP address or domain is associated and known to have a bad reputation. And that's another great barrier between Bob, the user, going to a site that's going to bring him harm. Now, in addition to all of these, there is one gigantic piece that's missing as far as a solution to protect users based on phishing attacks. Can you guess what that is? And you're saying, well, Keith, I bet it's something to do with training our users. You'd be absolutely correct. So after we implement all of these technical solutions, the end user education absolutely is critical for our success in protecting against phishing attacks. So that users know what to do when they see a link in their email, that they should never click on that link from the email. They should know how to handle attachments by never opening suspicious attachments. They should be aware that they should never reveal a password and send a password via email. There's no legitimate reason that a company would ask for a user to reveal their password and send it via email. And based on the platform that user's on, whether it's Mac or Linux or Windows, they should know and be tested on how you close an app and how you kill a process that won't close on its own. And if an incident happens, a security incident, they click on a link or did something they shouldn't, we want to make sure that they are confident enough to follow the correct procedure to get that reported and not hide in a hole and just hope the problem goes away. Because we want the visibility, we want to know what's happening so we can protect the rest of the network. In this nugget, we've taken a look at one aspect of social engineering, and that is tricking a user using a phishing attack. We've also identified some things that we can do in technical and training terms to help reduce the negative impact of phishing attacks on our systems. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of individuals who are really good at tricking others and lying and doing social engineering to compromise the security of an individual. In this video, I'd like to chat with you about some things that we can do to help reduce the risk, reduce the likelihood of being duped or compromised by social engineering attacks. So let's begin with some attitudes and thoughts that can assist us in reducing the risk of a social engineering attack. Whether it's an email that makes its way to our inbox or an inbound phone call, if It appears too good to be true. This is a lesson that I learned a long time ago. If it appears too good to be true, we can still be an optimist, but at the same time, we're going to probably say, that's not real. It's too good to be true. Secondly, if it's coming in and it's asking for information of any type from you, like your social security number, passwords, or it's giving you a warning that you're going to be audited by the IRS, or something else urgent, you'd want to use an out of band. It's a fancy way of saying another method for verifying that. So whether it's a phone call that comes in or an email comes in, use some other method to verify. Case in point, let's say the bank calls you, or somebody pretending to be your bank, and they say, oh, blah, 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 whatever it is. You could say, you know what, I appreciate the call. Let me call you back on the number on the back of my banking card, and you have a reference number that I can follow up on when I call back. Now, there's two sides to the story. The attacker is going to be disappointed that you're not giving them any information, not playing with them. And on the positive side, when you do call the bank and they say, yeah, that wasn't us, they're going to be glad that you took that extra step to call, make the outbound call to the published number for that bank. The same thing for emails. If you get an email that looks like it came from your bank, there's probably a lot of telltale signs in that email that it's not real. If you look at all the spelling, there's very likely some spelling errors. Now, I have seen some amazingly good phishing attacks with email that look totally legit. The secret is, if there's a link in that email, we just don't ever want to click on the link. If I need to go to Bank of whatever, or Chase or Capital One or whatever it is, I know how to get there in my own browser. I don't need, or nor should I use the link that's in the email, because if it's malicious, there's trickery happening. We want to avoid that trickery. Also, any inbound phone calls that we ever get and that we happen to pick up, they are likely to be fake if they're claiming to be the IRS or a government agency or some authority figure imposing doom and gloom if you don't act immediately. Because what they're doing is they're getting fear going on. And when people get into a fearful state and they start to go into hypnosis, oh my gosh, it's amazing what a person in a hypnotic, fearful state will do to comply with the attacker. And in all those cases, it's an individual, the attacker, who is impersonating. If somebody shows up at Bob's desk and they show up and they look like they have a badge, they look like they have a toolkit, and they're there to work on his computer, it's okay for Bob to ask for ID. And if he's not comfortable, what Bob can do is say, you know what, Jim, or whatever the technician is, give me a moment, step away for a moment, keep that person in eyesight, and make a call. So if this person is supposed to be from the service desk, call the service desk and confirm, hey, I've got Jim here, he's supposed to be working on my computer, is he supposed to be here? Because it's amazing how bold individuals can be who are really, really practiced at lying and deceiving to compromise user security. Another aspect regarding social engineering is shoulder surfing. So if Bob is sitting here at his computer and he is logging on, and somebody is standing right next to him looking at his keystrokes, it's possible that person can figure out the simple password, what that password is. So whenever Bob logs on, or if you're on a mobile device and it's not doing biometric authentication, it's doing like a PIN or something like that, you want to just take a moment and look around and make sure that no one is watching you as you're putting that information in. Or if you have a screen that came up and there's confidential information on that screen, be aware of who's behind you. And there are overlays that we can put physical ones on our screens, mobile devices and on computers, so that unless you're seeing directly in front of it, you really can't see it very well. And those are handy for planes and other tight environments where you have people fairly close by you, but at the same time you don't want them reading what's on your screen. Another technique in social engineering that's often used is to get physical access into a facility is referred to as tailgating. Case in point, an individual, when they go into a secure facility or some other location is locked, they have their smart card or their identity card with a magnetic strip, and they swipe it and it opens the door and they go in. So an attacker who wants to gain access to that facility, posing as another employee from that same facility who's just trying to go in off that first person card swipe, we want to make sure that when we go in ourselves that we keep the other person at bay and just say, you know what, it's policy, everybody's got to swipe, I'm so sorry. Because human nature is, let's do a nice thing for a person, let's hold the door and so forth. So some of the techniques are used to help limit things like tailgating would be a security guard watching the entrance, or a man trap where there's authentication, the person goes in 2 or 3 steps, the door closes, then the second door opens, and then that person continues to go through, just forcing only one person at a time. And one other aspect is dumpster diving. Because if a company has sensitive information that was printed at some point, account numbers, health information, company secrets, rosters of employees, whatever it is, if the company did not dispose of that appropriately, we'll have a separate set of nuggets on disposal of information and data after we're done with it, but if the company has dumped that into a dumpster and somebody physically comes back later and they go in that dumpster, so it's called dumpster diving, and they sort through and they get that data, that's a compromise of our data. So the solution to that is to do proper disposal of data, regardless of what media it's on or what type of form it's in. If we do proper disposal, then the attacker, dumpster diving or going in after our data, won't have anything to go in after because it'll all be properly destroyed and dealt with. So one last aspect, and that is the feeling of social engineering. If we feel like we're being compromised or there's a potential attack that's coming in, we definitely in our corporate environment want to be aware with the exact procedures that we should follow in reporting that, because the people who are managing and keeping their eye on that, they need to know what's happening. Because if you or I are getting a phishing attack, it's very likely that other people in the organization are also getting a phishing attack. And as a result, we want to educate the users in our community and their company to help protect us as a whole. So thank you for joining me in this nugget on reducing risks regarding social engineering. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. In this video, we're going to chat about 3 main elements in the world of security and how certain types of threats can compromise that security and what we can do about it. So let's chat about the 3 major elements in a security model. And those 3 elements are very often commonly done as C, I, A. And the C is for confidentiality, the I is for integrity, and the A is for availability. And we broke each one of those down. The C, confidentiality, just means only those individuals who are authorized and should be able to see and process the data can't, and the people who are not authorized cannot see it. So it's confidential in that nature. The I for integrity implies that the data is reliable, it's accurate, and only those individuals and systems that are authorized to make changes to that data are making changes. You don't have just random individuals and unauthorized people making changes to the data, which would cause a loss of integrity. And availability is the third one. So as we look at threats to security, we can consider it as threats to any one of these. And one of the threats that's quite easy to pull off is called a DOS, and that stands for denial of service. So let's pick Jim out here on the internet, and Jim's an attacker, and Jim is just mad, and he wants to make this server, server B, he wants to make that server unavailable to anybody. So what he can do is get some software and launch some type of an attack against that server with the intent of making that service unavailable. And that's referred to as DOS attack, a denial of service attack. There's lots to choose from. One of those would be a SYN-FLET attack. And that type of an attack, it leverages the way a three-way handshake works with TCP. So Jim sends a TCP SYN request, the server sends a SYN-ACK back, and Jim doesn't respond. He just lets the server wait and tie up that resource for a few moments. But he also sends thousands and thousands of these TCP SYN requests. So that type of DOS attack, a SYN-FLET attack, is attempting to mess up or compromise the availability of that system. Now, if Jim's computer by itself is not enough, meaning it's not able to overwhelm the server, another option is a DDoS, which is a distributed denial of service attack, which implies botnet. So with a botnet, Jim and 5,000 friends, they could all those computers as zombies in this botnet could be asked by the command and control center to go ahead and do a SYN-FLET or other attack that would consume all the resources on the server. And as a result, that server, if it can't handle it anymore, would then be unavailable. It's affecting the availability of that server. Now, to solve this or to help with this situation, we simply put somebody big and strong, like this guy, a firewall, in between the users and the services. And this firewall with dedicated CPU and some really cool algorithms can identify half-formed TCP sessions and then only forward legitimate requests onto the final server. So he's basically stepping in and saying, I'll take it, I can handle it, I've got the CPU, I'm going to protect the server. Another threat to security is referred to as MITM, which stands for man in the middle. So let's imagine that computer 2 on a good day is going out to the internet, and life is good as traffic goes like this normally. I'll put some green. It goes into the switch forwards it out this port to the router, who forwards it to the firewall, who does its NAT and all that wonderful stuff out to this internet router, and then on to the final server. Great, I'll put that server in black right there. Okay, that's the server he's going to. Well, if computer 1 decided that it was going to be a little bit malicious and use a man in the middle attack, what computer 1 could do is identify what are the layer 2 addresses, says computer 1, of computer 2 and the default gateway that computer 2 is using. And then it could spoof. Now, spoof is a fancy way of saying lie. It could send out ARP messages, and it could tell router 1, hey, the layer 2 address of computer 2 is me. And it could send out a spoofed ARP message to computer 2 saying, hey, the MAC address, the layer 2 address of the default gateway is me. And what that would do, and I'll put this in red, it would cause traffic from computer 2 now going up to the internet like this. From computer 2, it would be forwarded up to computer 1. And then computer 1 would forward that to router 1, which would continue out to the internet. As that traffic comes back from the server, it would go from the router, and it would go back to the hacker computer, and then the hacker computer would forward it onto its final destination. So computer 2 may not even know that that happened, but that's very possible with a technique called ARP spoofing. Again, spoofing is about lying about what the real addresses are. Now, the question is, if this hacker is able to see, what are we compromising here? And the answer is it would be, hard for me to write C. The answer would be compromising confidentiality because that traffic is now being seen by computer 1. So solutions to this would include using encrypted traffic like HTTPS or VPN, so even if the person at computer 1 saw the data, he or she would be able to make sense of it, but also we'd use network. Or techniques like DAI, which is an acronym for Dynamic ARP Inspection. So we have to have the switches paying attention to ARP messages and keeping the devices honest so that spoofing like that cannot happen. And if we have our firewalls looking for malicious content or malicious traffic, and we have antivirus, anti-malware software running on our computers looking for malicious content and malicious websites that people might be trying to go to and stopping it, those are all great measures. But there's also the concept of a zero-day attack. And a zero-day attack is a vulnerability that exists or a weakness in a system that hasn't been either publicly made known yet or even known to the manufacturer or developer of the software. So if an attacker finds a vulnerability and starts taking advantage of it, that's an example of a zero-day attack. We didn't have any warning or precautions. But even with zero-day attacks, we have next-generation firewalls and advanced software that can look for anomalies. Like, hey, this is what normal looks like. All of a sudden, this is not normal. And we can have some warning that something's off or something's not working exactly correct. Or on computers, we can have whitelists, lists that specifically say what apps or processes can run. And then if anything tries to run outside of that, it's not allowed based on the whitelist that's imposed on that computer. In this night, we've identified the three main pillars for security, also some attacks and threats that can compromise that security. We also identified some solutions to help mitigate or reduce the risks of those threats. I'll see you in the next video. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. A lot of homes today have the Internet of Things with digitally controlled lock or keypad where you can put in a code and open the door with a key, a physical key, and those are great. But imagine if an attacker came to the front door and sat there and tried a code, didn't work, tried another code, didn't work. And imagine that attacker was able to sit there for 10 years, bathroom breaks, food breaks, whatever. Basically sit there for 10 years, they would probably get enough patience to be able to figure that out. Well, in computer networks, that cycle of being able to try a lot of different passwords is very powerful in breaking and cracking passwords. In this video, I'd like to talk with you about the mechanics behind how passwords work and how vulnerable they can be, and then some solutions to improving our security for network devices and computers regarding passwords. So we've been familiar with passwords. We've been using passwords for a long time to protect our stuff, whether it's Bob logging into a computer or logging into his home device, or if he's on a mobile device, there's a PIN code you might be using as a type of password. We also have really cool biometric options now with a lot of mobile devices. But on a traditional system, when we're creating a password, let's say our password is BADPASSAB3. Okay, so we create this bad pass. One of the reasons it's terrible is because it's going to be hard for somebody to remember that. So while we're talking about passwords, a great thing to do is pass phrases, 2 or 3 words that are meaningful to you that don't really go well together, and then you just never tell anybody what that is, but you'll be able to remember what they are. So here's this password and the system. If you create that password on the system, what it's going to do is store that password as a hash, which is a whole bunch of characters, and it's referred to as a one-way hash. Meaning, you can take the hash algorithm, put in the password, generate the hash, but you can't take this hash, this long string of text, and reverse engineer it. So that keeps this password safe in the system. So the next time Bob logs in, he uses the password of badpass83, and then the hash is generated compared against the hash is stored, and if it matches, then Bob's allowed in. In fact, let me show you a hash generator as an example. And here is one right here, courtesy of www.tobtu.com. All right, I did a Google search, so thank you guys for having this. So I'm going to go ahead and create some passwords. I'm going to click on generate passwords. So here's the passwords, and then if we click on calculate hashes, it'll calculate the hashes for each one of those. Notice that this very first one, if I change that V, the last character, to like a 6, and then I click on calculate hashes, the hashes are significantly different just based on one character. So a hash is a one-way function, and it's a hash that's being stored in the system so that we're not storing the actual real password in plain text. And that information is going to come in handy in just a second as we take a look at rainbow table. So to start off, if an attacker wanted to discover Bob's password on the system, first of all, the hacker has to either get to the system or has to have remote connectivity to the system to try it out. And one option that the attacker could use, if he has either of those options, is referred to as a brute force attack, which is just what it sounds like. It's like, okay, I'm going to try every possible combination. And we may start with 7 characters and go all the way to 14, or we may start with 1 character, there are 2 and 3, and try every possible combination, special characters, upper, lowercase, alphanumeric, everything. And because we can have a computer do it, we don't have to manually type them in like the attacker at our front door, but instead we can have the computer system try one, then the next, then the next, then the next, and possibly go through millions and millions of combinations in a fairly short period of time. That's a brute force attack. Now, one of the tendencies of humans is to use common passwords, or very common passwords. So another variant of this is the dictionary attack. And in a dictionary attack, instead of just trying every possible random combination, which there's lots and lots of those, we can use a dictionary attack and take, let's say, 11 million. And there are dictionaries with just millions and millions and millions of possibilities. And instead of trying a brute force attack with every possible combination, we try a dictionary attack, and we load a dictionary that says try all these passwords. So for each of these password attempts, the hash is being generated on the fly, compared against the hash in the system, and then for success, we get logged in and we have access to the system. Now, how do we prevent this from happening? And the answer is we do some clipping, some limits. And those limits would be in the form of number of failed login attempts. So on all of our systems, this also goes for our switches and our routers and our firewalls, we should identify what the maximum number of login attempts is before we have a short timeout on that system. So if an attacker is trying 11 million combinations or 100 million combinations, they're going to have to do 5 and then wait, let's say 5 minutes as a timeout. And then the system will automatically allow again in 5 minutes and then again in 5 minutes. So to get to 11 million, if you have to wait 5 minutes after each 5 attempts, that is, virtually forever. And if we're talking about remote logins, we could also set up access controls that specify only certain allowed IP addresses that are allowed to log in or attempt to connect to a system. Another challenge is that if we have a timeout, let's imagine it's this router right here, we have a 5-minute timeout based on a certain number of failed login attempts. That could be a denial of service because the attacker can tie up that system and not allow anybody to log in. Then the attacker has successfully locked out the real administrator. So we'd also want to consider some type of a backdoor or alternate path, like a console port or remote access server, to get access to a device that otherwise is not allowing logins from the traditional methods. Another option that attackers are going to want to use is if they can get a system offline, or they can dump the database of hashes and they can work on it offline, they can go through many more combinations of passwords and do it directly without having to do the formal login process, because they're just comparing hashes against the database in an offline fashion where it's not doing the formal full login every time we're logging attempt. Another option, as far as password attacks, include rainbow tables. If we want to do a dictionary attack, and let's imagine there's 11 million passwords in this dictionary, instead of trying to log in with one, have it generate the hash, compare the hash, yes or no, go to the next, which takes a lot of CPU and time at the moment to do it, instead we take those 11 million passwords and we could pre-calculate the hashes on all of them. And then using a rainbow table against a hash database, we could just do a straight one-to-one comparison. Okay, the first entry in the rainbow table, which is the hash, does it match a hash in the actual hash table on the system? If yes, great, we're in. If not, next. But because these hashes are already calculated as part of the rainbow table, the processing of going through millions and millions and millions of possible combinations goes a lot faster. So it may take time, a lot of time, to generate a rainbow table, but once we actually use the rainbow table over and over again, it's a lot faster in cracking passwords. Alright, so enough doom and gloom regarding people breaking in and stealing our passwords. What is the answer? Well, there's a couple. Number one, if we have the option for doing 2-factor authentication with an authenticator app or a one-time password along with the password that we know, that is one of the best options available. If we don't have the option of doing 2-factor or multi-factor authentication, to be using strong passwords, using passphrases, 2 or 3 words that we can remember, words that don't typically go together. If you want to put uppercase on a couple characters that you can remember, that's great. But that'll help us in not writing passwords down. It also helps us making very complex passwords. And as a sane solution, probably the best answer for protecting and for using passwords is to use a password manager that can help identify if you have duplicate password across your login. If so, let's correct that. It can also suggest and remember strong passwords to use for sites. And then you have a master password that unlocks your password manager, and you can help with that backup in the cloud. So password manager, if you're not currently using one, getting a good password manager and starting to use it will change your life. It'll also help you know that you're more secure as you log in and work with multiple sites on a daily basis. So thanks for joining me in this nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.
Alright, I guess I am finished. Very cool. Huh. Alright, well everybody, I finished with my training. It actually went quick because I could watch it at a higher speed than real time. I do have a meeting at noon that I'm going to hang up before, but I'm going to check up on social media, I guess. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, it looks like my flour was delayed by a day. So I was able to get some King Arthur bread flour from King Arthur flour directly, which is cool. They're actually sold out now last time I checked, but it was like 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago that I ordered it, and it finally shipped, and it was supposed to arrive today, but now all of a sudden it's not arriving until tomorrow. So I have to make do with the bread that I have, which is a half loaf of pepper parmesan sourdough, which is delicious, I'm not going to lie. And then tomorrow, hopefully, I can make some. And I got yeast, so you know what? I do have some all-purpose flour. I bet I can make bread with all-purpose flour. And if I use regular yeast, it'll probably, like, yeah, might have to try that. Look up some yeasted bread. Last time I made yeasted bread, I think I let it proof too long, which makes sense, right? Because I normally make sourdough, and sourdough takes hours and hours to proof, but yeasted bread doesn't. And I think I let it proof too long because it rose really well. It was huge, but inside it was like crumbly almost. Like when I was slicing it, like it would crumble apart, and like I don't know. It wasn't like it was dry and crumbly, but it did. It tasted great, but it was not easy to like. When I put it in the toaster, it would like fall apart when I tried to put butter on it. I think I let it proof too long. So I guess that's a whole nother aspect of baking that I need to discover. And hold on, I got a message I can read. Oh, okay, let's see. Oh, man, those Windows updates are killing the... Ooh. So, like, the updates are making them no longer work? Because that, man, that is incredibly unfortunate. Um, I like how Linux does updates, although I have to admit I wish that... So the... You started a conversation in my head that I'm going to let spill out a bit, Cody. I really like the idea where they're starting to allow, like, the idea of kernel updates in real time so that it actually puts the new kernel right into memory without a reboot. I heard about that a couple of years ago, but I haven't actually seen it in process because updating the server, it still often says your server needs a reboot, which it is so difficult to find a good time to reboot any production server. It's annoying, especially when there are other like mounts in play and dependent like other servers are depending on that being up and running, and then you have to worry about like the order of rebooting servers. What a pain. Anyway, yeah, I just Windows just seems like there's a lot of updates, and it seems like they're very large in size. So I don't know. I'm going to come from the device manager and device. Wow. That is crazy with wireless cards being like that. That's a scary update issue. I mean, I guess it's the kind of thing where if you have like a huge environment, it's a really good reason to say, hey, we need to have some control group hardware issues so that we can update it, make sure it works before rolling it out system wide. Could you imagine disabling the wireless cards on an entire group of laptops? Oh my word, that would just be a nightmare. All right, I need to use the restroom, and I'll be right back. And I get ready for. I'm gonna close this at noon, but I'm gonna use the restroom real quick, so I'll be back. see, switch to chat time. Boom. Windows updates that. Yeah. Ugh. It's a little bit chilly in my office. I think I will turn up my heat, which is not really a heater. It's a Bitcoin miner that is horribly not even close to profitable or breaking even, but it produces heat, and I have them, so it's basically a space heater that mines like a ridiculously small amount of Bitcoin. So I'm thinking about, I don't know what I'll talk about. We have 20 minutes left. 20 minutes? Yeah, about 20 minutes left. So my office, as much as I love my office, and I truly do, I really like my office. I think it's cool. I like the lighting. I like all the bookshelves. I like everything that I've done with it. But I'm going to move my office to an upstairs bedroom in our house. Not because there's anything wrong with my office, other than the upstairs bedroom will be a little bit bigger, which is cool. I mean, I'd like to be able to have like a pull down green screen or like room for like photography and stuff. But this room then, which is in the very back of our house. So our house goes like, there's the kitchen, and then there's a laundry room where the dogs' crates are, and then over here is my office off the back of the laundry room, which makes it nice because it's separate from the house. But my plan is to make what is currently my office now, which has no heat in it, by the way. I have to use a space heater. Anyway, so I'm going to make this a pantry, partially because of the stupid shortages of all the food and supplies that there are, and it's going to be like the post-depression grandparents who like have all of this stuff stored in their pantry. But anyway, it's going to be a pantry. We don't have a freezer, so there's going to be a freezer and dry storage and stuff in here. So yeah, Matt, I'm going to move my office up to a bedroom upstairs. It's going to be just a summertime project, I think, after we can actually go out and do stuff. I'm going to take all of the things in my office, like all the shelving and the books and everything, and I'm going to move it all to a bedroom because our kids have moved out. So whoa. Oh, well, sorry, I just got distracted here. Nightbot actually stopped Lewis from yeah. Apparently, Lewis, I apologize. Apparently, Nightbot doesn't like the word toilet paper all in caps. I'll look and see how I can get it to stop that. You are somebody who can say pretty much whatever you want. You're a trustworthy person in the channel. I'll look into that. But hey, Nightbot did something. It stopped Lewis from saying toilet paper in all caps. Anyway, Matt, yes, I'm gonna be a great post-COVID grandparent. There will be toilet paper for days. Anyway, yeah, this is gonna be it's going to be a pantry, which will be nice because it's not heated, so it'll stay nice and cool. But it's connected to the house, so it shouldn't freeze in the wintertime, but I might have to have some sort of like, if it gets super cold, like kick on some sort of a heat situation. But anyway, so yeah, freezer, shelves all over. And then upstairs, my office is going to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to have one wall. It might actually be a wall with bookshelves on it, but I want to have a ceiling mounted pull down screen that can be a green screen, it can be white screen, black screen, multiple things, so I could do a photo shoot because I really need to get a photo shoot done, and I have a ton of cameras and stuff, and my wife is a photographer. So anyway, I want to set that up. That's going to be just a summertime project. And the thing is, if I'm designing my office from scratch, I'm going to put a lot of thought into exactly what I want it to look like. I love the lighting that I have in my office currently. I really like to have like the colored walls and like the backlighting and stuff. So anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that. But I'm also going to have so many plans for this room as a pantry, and I'll probably post some of the videos there. Like, I've already been thinking like, okay, what shelves, how high, how deep? Like, some of the shelves are going to be particularly deep, like on the back wall there, like where Mr. Rogers is. That's the short wall in my office. The other wall is a little bit, my office is probably like 10 by 12 or 13. So that shorter wall, I'm going to have like shelves that are 2 feet deep so that I could have 2 buckets, like 5-gallon buckets deep. so I can rotate stock so that it doesn't, get super old. I don't want to have just like old funky stuff in reserve. But anyway, yeah, I put a lot of thought into it. I'll be putting a lot more thought into it. But built-in green screen wall for stuff. So we use a green screen occasionally for CBT Nuggets. I don't think I've used it for any official. Oh no, I did. I used the green screen. If you go to teach.gg, that intro video, that was a green screen video that I used the green screen. I have a pop-up green screen that actually Matt Beecher, who is in the channel here, ordered for me. He's on the trainer team. And it's a pop-up one, but I'd love to have a full wall that pulls down behind me. And so but I'd also like to not just have green screen. I'd also like to have a white screen that I can pull down for taking photos, a black screen to pull down. I don't even know what the black screen would be for, but sometimes it's just cool, a black screen. I want to be able to have room for lighting. Right now my office is very cramped because everything is kind of like cramped in together and there's not room for a lot of lights, but I'd like to be able to have some of the umbrella lights that I can shine different places for photography or for video or that sort of thing. Plus, right now, my office is half man cave, half office, and I have to think through if I want my office to be that way in the future or if I just want it to be my office for recording and stuff like that. Because I don't know. I mean, like all video game systems and stuff, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I have to think through that. Because there would be room, like I have a big CRT television. It's like a 32-inch CRT Sony Trinitron. It weighs like 200 pounds. It's an enormous CRT television, but it's like probably the nicest CRT television they made before they stopped making CRT televisions. And I have that for some classic gaming stuff that really worked best on CRT screens. So, I mean, that'd be really cool. There's no room in my office currently for it. But in my bigger office, there would be room if I want it to be an office with like that kind of stuff in it. I kind of do, because I also have like I don't know if you look in the when I did a 360 view of my office, there's a I have an arcade console thing, like one that I ordered. I'd like to have that assembled and put up, but there's not room in my office for that, so I'd like to have that. A 42-inch flat screen for reasons. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see here. I think the cable's long enough. But if you look up there, yeah, that's like a 60-inch TV, I think. Maybe it's not 60-inch. I wonder how big it is. 50-inch? I don't know. It's a pretty large television for an office, but it's right up there. I do use it. It's a 4K TV. I use it as an extra monitor, actually, for the streaming computer. And my streaming computer is also my VR computer, so it's up there. But yeah, for gaming, I don't know. I can't imagine having an office that doesn't have a couch. Sometimes I just need to sit in a couch and just stare at the ceiling and drool a bit. So I'll probably make it a man cave / office again, maybe with just a little bit more room and a little better thought put into it. That'll be when I made this office. I had never actually had an office. Actually, that's not true. I had an office in my last home, but it was already like built-in shelves and stuff. So I don't know. That's my thought. A sound booth for podcasting. Yes, and I do want to design it from the go with some acoustic thoughts in mind. Like right now, the bookshelves are great because the books break up the echo a lot. However, the bare walls don't, which is one of the reasons I have a whole bunch of stuff on my walls. But it would be nice if I could design it from scratch so that the ceiling, I'd like to put some acoustic tiles on the ceiling. Plus, they kind of look cool. And also in the, just strategically around. This is a little bit echoey, but that's coming from the monitors and my desk. So I don't know how to best get rid of that echo, but I don't think it's too bad. I think right now my microphone is decent, even though I'm here with, hard surfaces around me. So anyway, yeah. I'm looking forward to the big office. So Matt, the very long answer to your short question, yes, I'm going to be moving my office upstairs. We have, my girls have all moved out. There's 3 bedrooms upstairs, plus we have our master bedroom downstairs. Even if we have bedrooms set up for exchange students that we may or may not have and guests, we can still use the small one upstairs. Because Donna and I both want to have a pantry. We don't have much storage in this house. It's a really old house. And for some reason, back in the 50s when the house was built, they they didn't do a lot for like storage and closets. There's a couple closets that are just add on in the bedrooms, but like there's no linen closet even. There's no place to store linen. So anyway, I'm gonna miss my tiny man cave office. Yeah, but it's gonna look similar. It'll have the same sort of things. Fewer like random windows. I like having the window so I can look outside, but admittedly, the window is a little bit awkward for me when I'm trying to do things video related because it's a little bit ugly just to have it there. So anyway, I don't know. It'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm actually looking forward to having a pantry with stuff because I can't show you now, this cable's not long enough, but in our laundry room, you may have seen, I actually built some shelving in our laundry room, which is nice. But even that, like, it's full of like crock pots and rice makers and blenders and all the things that we just don't have storage for in our kitchen are now there, and so there's not room for much storage. We have a weird little, I think it's called a pantry, but it's just a big tall cupboard. And if I put a pantry in my old man cave, is it a mantry? Oh, or a pan cave. Mantry sounds better, yeah. So, Matt, you might know this. So there's a Nugget demo, which is like a thing that we do when we watch, all the employees watch. Is somebody doing it remotely? I mean, the office is still closed. So how is that working out? Do you know? Inquiring minds want to know. See how I put Matt on the spot? Yeah, it's in 10 minutes. I'm going to actually close this down. The plan is to go until it's time for that meeting, but I'm curious, is it just going to be somebody, and is somebody presenting remotely? See, normally how they work is it happens at headquarters, and so there's a big group of people at headquarters that are attending, and then they stream it remotely for people like me who work in an office with Mr. Rogers. So, to my knowledge, yeah. So we'll find out. It'll be interesting. Matt, I don't know how long you were watching, but I finished all of my compliance training today. Will they be wearing pants? You know what? I assume they will be wearing pants. I hope that they're going to be wearing pants. It's something that I am very conscious of, especially on Wednesdays, that I'm wearing pants because nobody wants to see Sean get up to go to the bathroom and have like boxer shorts showing or something. And if that is something that you want, that's messed up. Ew. Oh, Matt, I don't know if you're here, but guess what is coming in the mail? I got a pound of SAF instant yeast coming in the mail. I'm super stoked. It arrives today. I still don't have any flour, but yeah. Can I explain compliance versus certification? Oh, compliance. It was just making sure that as a company, as employees, we comply with all the training that I did today was just complying with like GDRP or GRDP or whatever the EU stuff that you talked about. Like, you know, that we talked about that earlier, along with like what's appropriate, inappropriate in the workplace. Just compliance, meaning complying and following the rules as they are appropriate. Certification is more the GDRP, yeah. Certification is just like I guess you could be certified in compliance, but it's just like a certification would be like when you're certified that you definitely know your information or certified that you've passed a certain thing, whereas compliance is just making sure that you're actually following the rules. Maybe that's a good explanation. And it was actually interesting for me. The GDPR, yeah, that's a thing. That was interesting for me. A lot of the stuff that was specific to the EU, but not specific in just like it's important for people who work with anybody in the EU to understand that stuff. And a lot of it was, while it's not the same initials, the same sort of privacy stuff also applies everywhere in the world, hopefully. But also our compliance training today, or at least what I was assigned, also had to do with, appropriateness in the workplace and being inclusive and all that sort of stuff. And then lastly, some training from Keith, and my training today was about the IT aspect of like phishing and that sort of stuff. So that was something I was far more familiar with. The technology stuff I'm far more familiar with, but the human meat space stuff, it was good for me to get trained on. So I got an Ender 3 Pro 3D printer yesterday. Really, Matt? So I've always wanted a 3D printer, and I've never, I don't have the room, and I haven't been able to justify the purchase. Thankfully, they keep getting better and better and cheaper. So by the time I get around to getting one, I'm pretty excited that it might be like something that is, one, super useful. Like they even have them with like multiple colored filament stuff now, which is just so cool, but also affordable and higher quality. So yeah, let me know what you think about it. What sort of things you do with it, because I'd like to see. Yeah. 230. Yeah. So you have to like record some of the things, or at least take pictures of some of the things that you print, because yeah, I'm really excited about 3D printing. It's just something I've never done. Generally, when I do something, so this is, you probably already know this about me. When I get on board with something, I tend to go all out. You can ask my family. Like when I started doing hydroponics, man, I built an entire system, automated system in my basement. When I started, so I want to befriend crows, like, well, bird feeders and bird streaming. I mean, you've already seen so many cameras and stuff were there, but I want to befriend crows. And so what did I do? I went all out. I ordered a crow call. I ordered crow decoys. I ordered specific unsalted, unroasted peanuts in the shell. So if I start doing 3D printing, I just know that I'm going to go way too deep, and it's going to like consume me. So I'm trying to hold off until it's at a point where I think it'll be useful for more than just to satisfy my curiosities. Yeah, see, that's the problem, Matt. If I get a 3D printer, I'm going to get that, and then I'm going to get another one, and I'm going to have multiple kinds, and they're going to have multiple filament types, and I'm like, oh, I don't have this kind, I have to get that. Well, what if I want to print this sort of thing? I'm going to need that. Well, it's not big enough if I want to print this. So I'm trying really hard to hold off in the 3D printing world until I can print myself a pizza. But yeah, so anyway. For example, glasses, right? I found out the other day, it may have been on, I only have 5 minutes left, but it may have been during the live stream that I actually discovered. So, you know, I collect vintage 80s collector's glasses. You probably know that about me. I have them all over my house, like Smurf glasses and Garfield glasses. Well, I found out that in 78, Burger Chef had, here, let me switch to this view. So Burger Chef had a set of glasses for endangered species at the time. I don't even know what Burger Chef is. I've never been to a Burger Chef. I don't think they have them in my area. But I found out that they made this set of 4 endangered species collector's glasses. So sure enough, that same day, because they existed, and I'm such a collector of vintage 80s, 70s, and 80s collector's glasses, I had to buy the whole set. So from like 3 different people, I managed to collect the whole set, and I have 2 extras because I like to have the whole set, but I also like to have a few spares so that I can use them, because just having them is fun, but being able to use them on a daily basis is even more fun. So yeah, that's the kind of thing. Put them back up there. That's something too. My office, my new office, may have a shelf along the entire ceiling that's backlit and has hundreds of glasses, because I have so many glasses. In fact, it might have to be multiple layers. I don't know. I have all around our kitchen, there are glasses, but I still have like totes full of them that I don't have enough room for. So anyway. The first thing, the printer actually mods pieces to improve the printer. Oh, that's cool. I could make custom stamps for my glass collections. I could. I absolutely could. See? I mean, there's reasons, but if I get it, and I don't have room right now. That's the thing. I do not have room for one. I don't have a garage either, so you know I can't put it in the garage. So I truly don't have room for it. I know you're thinking, but Sean, you're about to get a bigger office. I know. Hush up. Anyway, yeah. All right, I think I'm going to wrap this up, because we have a company meeting that Matt has to go to and I have to go to. And I did all of my compliance training, which was awesome. So thanks everybody who distracted me between the videos and talked about stuff. Now I'm going to probably research 3D printers. Thanks a lot, Matt. But really, take pictures of stuff you're doing because I'm curious about how it works for you. Things you like about it, things you don't. So yeah, I'll see everybody later. And I will try to... hopefully I can post some video stuff too. I haven't posted any other YouTube videos at all, and that sucks. So see you later, everybody.